to go to a little preview mode real quick and then go live.
Okay.
All right, hello out there, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Today I'm here with Jason Story and David Green. We're just going to be talking about game development, shocking people, virtual reality, enterprise stuff, all kinds of just fun, interesting topics. So thanks, guys, for being here and coming to talk to everybody with me. And thanks, everybody, for coming to join us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the share button, go drop a link to this thing on Facebook and everything else. And if you have questions along the way, just drop them in chat, and we'll try to keep an eye on them and try to answer them as well. Anyways, yeah, thanks, guys, for being here. Thanks, Jason and David. I know a lot of people have seen Jason here a lot of the time, but David's been on at least, I know you've been on at least one interview that we did
just
together.
The one.
Okay, just the one. And then you've got lots of stuff online and out there, but for everybody who's just looking because they saw the title and the thumbnail, assuming that I keep it as clickbaity as it is, David's the guy behind that. He's the one who made the VR electric chair simulator. And it's not just like a VR headset thing where you're sitting in a chair. There was a lot more to it. It was kind of crazy. And I just I always introduce you or refer to you as like the VR guy or the guy that electrocutes people with chairs.
I do not want to be known as that.
It's well, for fun, right? Oh, you went silent again, Dave. This is just what we were talking about. VR headsets knocking everybody silent and knocking out their audio. What happens when you work it too much.
Yeah, well, hopefully this mic's actually okay. This one's terrible.
There you go.
Okay. Oh, and we should be back on.
You're good. You were sounding good. But anyway, I'll just tell everybody.
Right now. Okay, so everybody seems to bring that up every time I talk to them. I had a meeting with a guy the other day, and I was literally, I was just looking through your portfolio on your website, and I'm loving your stuff. Tell me about the electric chair. And I'm like, you don't want to hear about the Super Bowl or the stuff I did for all this enterprise. So he's like, no, I want to hear about the electric chair. Okay, fair enough. So the electric chair, where it was born was quite a few years ago. I'd done a hackathon, and I don't know if you were actually in the team, Jason, but I know Dylan and a few others.
No, I missed out on that one. It was like a VR horror hackathon or something, and it was like one of the few that I missed out on. So we were going to the hackathons like it was like once a month or every other month or something like that. And this one I just happened to miss when you did like the craziest, biggest project I'd seen.
Yeah, so I wanted to do something that was different. Like, you know, I love immersion. I build simulators, I build hardware for a living and software, obviously. And I wanted to do something that would take horror to the next level. So what I did is I decided I was going to actually put people into an electric chair in real life and then actually have them experience the electric chair in the virtual headset. But this thing would actually electrocute them, straight up put power through them. So what I did is hooked up an Arduino, some relays, done all the electrical engineering stuff. A guy called Armin Bastiani, a good friend of mine. And then when you would turn up to the experience, because it showcased that SoCal VR was the headliner there, you would turn up and there would be a big switch outside the room. And you would wait there and a red light would come on, and there was a sign that said, pull lever when red light comes on. And you'd pull this lever and suddenly you hear a scream in the other room. And you're like, what's going on? And you'd see somebody come out, obviously in shock, wondering what just happened to them. And you'd walk into the room and there it was, a great big electric chair. And I think you had the poster on the thumbnail there. And you'd basically start to realize what was going to happen to you. You'd sign a waiver, obviously, because I like to scare people even more. You'd put on a vest, which actually, I wanted to try a psychological experiment with it, and I actually had it playing a heartbeat through it, and then I would change the rate of the heartbeat on the vest on a regular interval so that I would bring you up and bring you down in the experience. And then you'd sit down in the actual chair itself, we'd put on the VR headset, your eyes would open in the virtual reality world. Yep, that's the scary thing I built. And you would then start to experience the thing. And there would be a voiceover in there, a narration telling you you'd been a bad person, you needed to be punished for that. You had the option to actually be strapped in, fully strapped into the actual chair, which I thought nobody would actually want to do. And this particular woman didn't actually want to be strapped in, but the straps are there.
A lot of people go for that option.
Weirdly, lots of people did, and it actually shocked me how many people would. But then the experience would kick off, and you'd notice this person in the corner looking at you and being jittery and all the rest, and you'd see that their hand was actually on a switch, and then you'd see the red light just above them, and everything would start clicking. I've just seen the red light outside, I pulled the switch, and I shot the person in there. And then basically what would happen is you'd hear the charge building up, and the red light would go on outside, and the next person in the queue would actually pull the switch and electrocute you. And every now and again, I'd basically make sure I pop my head outside and tell the person to wait. So the person in the chair would be waiting for ages and ages before the actual shot came down. So they didn't think it was instantaneous. Very, very short experience. And yeah, made a few headlines, got the headline on the local press and stuff like that. And a lot of people were having a go at me because saying I went too far.
Yeah. It was definitely a nut.
I love that. It's the first time I've heard of it, but what I really like is a lot of people have done variant versions of horror stuff in VR, and usually it's relegated to the physical aspect of it. But that whole bit with the pulling the lever is such a fantastic narrative device. Like, I love the idea that you're building this story of somebody seeing the experience and like having that sort of they call it the fridge moment, where you sort of go back and go, oh no, that now has context it didn't have before, and now I realize what happened. And yeah, it's pretty cool. That's the bit that interests me the most. I'm always interested in how you take a narrative and kind of apply it with the emotion as opposed to the single part of it.
Yeah, it's all about, it's the difference between creating an immersive experience and just an experience. A lot of times when I'm building things out, what I want to do is make sure that people kind of lose the idea of being in virtual reality. I don't like people getting in there and go, oh, virtual reality is amazing. I want people to go in there and experience the experience itself and come out and go, the experience was amazing. The virtual reality is just a tool in order to show the experience. It's the same as things like the simulator behind me and kiosks and the weaponry I build and all the rest of it. I don't want people to talk more about the hardware and the things that go into it. I want them to talk about the experience that they actually were in. It's like when you go into a movie, you don't go on about how good the movie theater was unless the movie wasn't that great. And I think one of the biggest experiences I had when building these things, I built a virtual reality real estate company quite a while ago because I do a lot of enterprise stuff. And people were going in and they were looking for all these amazing houses through Beverly Hills and all the rest of it because we were shooting these fantastic, $10, $20 million houses and all the rest. And also a lot of the lower line houses is California, so 500 grand, to $1 million. And this person's in there and he suddenly stops. He takes off the headset, turns around to his other half and says, you've got to get in here. And I'm like, oh, he's going to go on about how good the virtual reality is. He goes, and just before she's coming up, he goes, I think this is the kitchen we want. And puts on the headset and starts to come around the kitchen. She goes, oh yeah, I love the drawers, I love the cabinets, I love what we're going to do here, all that. And that's the point. I was like, right, okay, that experience works because they're not talking about, oh, get in here, VR's amazing. They're talking about getting in here because this house is awesome, or this is the particular thing we want from this, or this particular thing we want from that. And it's the same with the electric chair. Nobody was talking about the VR aspect of it. They were talking about the experience of being shot and how scared they were before they went in and how relieved they were when they came out. Not really, because they're all sitting there jittering. But it's
I again, I 100% agree, because what's really funny is I've worked on a bunch of experiences stuff where it was all about the emotional side of stuff. There's one called Dispatch that's on the Oculus Store that is meant to be about the emotion stuff. But my favorite thing I've done, as silly as it is, was at Bossa Studios in London. We did a Vive game jam, and it was just a 48-hour thing, like a little a game jam where you're using a conveyor belt and you're just picking stuff and throwing it into various containers. It's color coded, and it's like a little silly narrative where it's a boring day job, and then it slowly gets worse and worse to the point that you eventually lose because we purposely ramp up the amount of items. But the thing I really enjoyed about that was I found randomly people I didn't know. So back then, people used to watch all of those experiences and then play them all. Some YouTube channel, some guy playing it, and it shows him like doing the stuff, turning around, knocking over a glass with a big swing, and then someone else panicking, and the camera like pans to fix the water, and then just as he turns back, the other guy swings and punches his own wall, and then the camera like turns off slowly, and I was like, more than anything I've ever done, seeing this moment where this guy is basically demolishing his own house because he's so invested in what he's doing, it basically was so much more compelling,
Oh yeah. I'd done an XR training experience for a big manufacturing company, and we had to put loads of signs on the experience saying, "Do not lean on the equipment; it's not really there," because people would literally be working on this manufacturing stuff. And then in the actual manufacturing area, they actually have a bar they can lean on, and they would turn around and go to lean on it and stuff like that. And you're like, one person fell over, and we were like, okay, we're going to have to make that sign even bigger and actually remove that bar from the world and all the rest, because it's making people distract them, and they're basically thinking that they're in the real world. And kudos to the artist on that. This woman called Priscilla I was working with, because she's done such an amazing job. It just came across so realistic, the actual experience itself, and worked. Great training.
Yeah, and that's another one why life lesson for anybody who's ever giving VR demos: do use the lanyards, because one thing that we had was the same thing. We had somebody doing that conveyor belt thing, and then when they were done, they tried to put the controllers onto the conveyor belt and let go. Yeah. And but yeah, so we learned our lesson after that.
Yeah. It can come across too real, which is good. I mean, it's something called hyperreality, which is a phrase that's going to be coined soon, because they're going to get over XR, because they had VR and AR, and then they went, we're going to start putting MR more, and then we're going to start doing XR, and I was getting sick of it. I'm changing my marketing every 5 minutes, and now it's going to become to hyperreality, which is just the immersion where you don't know the difference between the real world and what is the virtual world. Which I love, and I'd love to see come along. But yeah, it's going to be changing on marketing again.
I always preferred the old one, just a classic term, presence. People said, use this experience, give you presence. It's nice and understandable and clear. Mm-hmm. I'm not a fan of all of this, the marketing jargon of it all either.
Yeah, too much marketing.
The worst is I have friends of mine who are in the VR space who call anything not VR pancake. That drives me insane. I was playing a pancake game the other day, and it's like, you can't just retroactively call everything pancake that's not VR. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Did I ever tell you guys the story about my daughter's friend in VR with the Vive? Oh, man, it was a giant bloody mess. It was good stuff. I had multiple people who've never, like, I've shown VR to lots of people, like in my house, and just like come over, random friends or people. I've had one of my friends who came. This was fucking hilarious. He was in there playing something. He was playing that little blarg ball game, the bouncy ball one. And then I put him into a zombie game. I forget which one it was. It might have been. It was one of the many zombie games that have come out.
Sunshine or something. Yeah.
Could have been. I don't remember. It could have been one that I made in a simulator, just in Unity. It's been so long, I don't even remember. He's playing, and he's standing there in my hallway, freaking out, screaming at these zombies. And all of a sudden, I don't know what happened. He turned around, freaked out, and jumped down the hallway. Literally, like, jumped head first down the hallway, dove out of fear. No. Hilarious. You rip the head. That's why they got like the breakaway cable. So rip the breakaway cable right out. Everything was fine. That was one funny one. The better one, or the worst one, I guess, was my daughter's friend who was playing. This is when I learned like don't keep any glass frames around your VR stuff. Because he is playing this was the what was the first one? The first zombie shooter that came out, the Cloud, the Haven, whatever it was. I forgot the name of it now. That first VR shooter zombie game.
It was Cloudhead Studios. Yeah, is that the one? That was Ghost Guys one?
I forget the name of it now. I've totally. But anyway, he's playing it, and there was a part where he was trying to hit a zombie with a gun, and then he turns around and he freaks out, and he's trying to hit a zombie with a gun again. He's like, he's screaming his head off, like freaking out, and slamming his hand into this glass poster picture frame that I got. There's blood everywhere, glass everywhere, and he's freaking out more because there's glass like going into his hand as he's screaming at these zombies.
It was a very realistic experience for him then.
Yeah, apparently both of them were very realistic experiences. So it's been it's interesting demoing that stuff. Safety is apparently a big problem.
Yeah, you have to teach people that when they're demoing to somebody who's never been in VR to basically stay near them.
Stay like right to grab them. Don't show them anything scary at all.
And also don't grab them. The amount of trainers that then they go to grab somebody partway through because they're trying to tell them something and they don't realize their headphones are on and literally scare the living daylights out of the person that's in there, even if they're not doing a scary experience, because suddenly they're in a field or something and this hand from nowhere is grabbing them. It's good fun.
One that I learned as a valuable life lesson is when you were setting up the original Guardian systems when they were first set up, almost all of them tell you to point the controller at your monitor as like an anchoring point. And the problem is, if you did that, you'd effectively be setting the forward direction to be towards all of your expensive equipment, which I always thought was so stupid. And because I remember one stage I set it up and I think someone was playing it. It might have been Audio Shield or something. And she basically just uppercutted my entire ultra-wide monitor. And it was just, now thankfully nothing broke, but it was a pretty fierce uppercut right to the middle of a very expensive piece of equipment. And after that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to set the pivot against the other direction, the longer side of the room, as far away from my technology as possible. And thankfully, it was, at least my home demos never had another incident like that.
Yeah. And most people don't have like a 10 by 10 room to just go and stand in the middle of, away from all their equipment that they can play in. They're usually surrounded by something.
Yeah, Dave's got his shit all set up with headsets falling out of the ceiling and stuff, and simulators in the background to go sit in and play in. Yep, just like that. Yep. Mine is in the box in the closet somewhere. It's been so long.
I have one dedicated cabinet here that's got a series of headsets ranging from there's Picos and Rifts and other Rifts, and there's some Vives in there too, but I don't use them semi-regularly, so they kind of get relegated to this cupboard over here.
Yeah, I've got all the old DK dev kits from Oculus out in the workshop, and then I keep a couple here. I mean, the one in the background over there. There we go.
It's always the hardest part in trying to point
in YouTube. Yeah. I am not a YouTuber. Okay, so there you go. That's the Index, and so I have the Index in the Rift, and then I have the Quests to the side here. But the Quests, I mean, they're always running out of battery, and you have to charge them all the time. So I try and do everything on a wired headset, and then move to the other one. But yeah, I mean, this office is crazy, so it all moves.
Yeah, they all come down from the ceiling, right?
All the headsets come down from the ceiling, and all my monitors and everything can be moved up and down the wall to be able to do standing or seated experiences as well. An engineer with far too much time on his hands.
And make it VR ready. Speaking of that stuff, though, and just the engineering, I just kind of wanted to briefly talk with you and Jason about like the physical stuff. So in the background, everybody can probably see you've got that chair there. They probably can't tell exactly what it is because from far away, it's a little bit hard to tell, but you can see those big giant arms. It's essentially it's a full-on like mech simulator, a VR mech simulator setup, and that just integrates in straight with Unity, right? Like or with Unreal or whatever game engine, and it's I think kind of interesting to people who've never done that kind of stuff, never like integrated in all of these different systems, like physical different systems. Thinking about like I got an arcade system I actually got to go build sometime this week and wire up so I can run Unity stuff on there too. and it's somewhat of a similar process, although yours is definitely a whole lot more complex. Like I just got to deal with a couple buttons. You got to deal with all kinds of crazy stuff. So yeah, I don't know. You guys have any just thoughts on that, or talk about that stuff a little bit? Just about like integrating like physical, like real hardware with the games and with the tech.
It's got a lot more easy these days. So it used to be the case where you had to look at writing drivers and do an awful lot of stuff to get the things going. And even when you look at the code side, coding your own chips, sets, and boards and all the rest used to be super complicated. Nowadays, you can get something like an Arduino or even a NetJuino if they're still a thing. But yeah, the old Arduinos are awesome. I have Arduinos everywhere in my office, controlling things via IoT or Bluetooth or just straightforward connections.
Even have the mini Arduinos with built-in Wi-Fi now? It's crazy. Like this size, and you can basically have a microcontroller that controls whatever the hell you want. It's crazy.
Yeah, Arduino Nano IoT 33. I buy them at bulk. So yeah, for instance, the lighting on my computer. So I have a wall-mounted computer that's lit, custom case, custom build, custom cut, and all the rest. Because again, too much time. And my wife doesn't make me do things; she just lets me get on with whatever the hell I want to do. Now, the Arduino is controlled by the IoT, and I've got a system here that I can just literally flick switches and change the color sets behind the computer, or have it do rainfall or dance or whatever. I barely turn it on. It's just a showpiece. But with the simulator as well, a lot of times you're plugging that straight in via USB, or you can do it over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. It's usually, I have the simulator wired direct because I want to reduce down the lag as much as possible, obviously. And then, yeah, the Arduino itself will have multi-controllers. They'll control actuators that will lift various aspects of the simulator. This one has 15 degrees in nearly every direction. Your pitch and pivot, it goes down, up, side to side.
Wait, how does it control those? So
the Arduino has the outputs, and that goes to motor controllers, and those motor controllers will control actuators. It's more complicated than that, but just for the basic sets, they're like pistons.
And then what's sending the controls to the Arduino to tell it to do that? How does that work?
You can do it several ways. You could do a shared file. You could do a direct link to it, the old comm systems and all the rest. Can't remember what this one's running on at the moment, but it's ridiculously straightforward. You're literally just picking it up as a separate computer and then sending.
We've usually done UDP stuff with it, like that way you can just have a little you can have a little remote web client that you can send data back and forth with. I haven't done specifically a mech suit thing, but I have done robot arms, which were meant for remote firefighting, and so they're mounted onto a vehicle, and you would take the VR controllers, and as you'd move it, we basically built our own very lightweight packets and then transmit it, and then the same thing, basically control the arm, and a kind of you'd be able to have a virtualized version in VR that you could control, and it would replicate the motions and that kind of thing. So for that, it was just basically make the packets as small as possible and just fire them over UDP as much as possible, and just that's yeah.
And that's super important. Keep them light, because the lag on those sort of things of reading and sending and all the rest of the things going to get, especially if you're in it. If your simulation is pointing you that way, but the simulator is catching up and pointing you that way, the motion sickness you're going to get is going to be extreme, because it's going to be doubled, because you're literally being pulled in a different direction than your actual sensors are sending you in. And that's the main point of these things, to simulate. I mean, the other thing is you can do things with simulators, like with the actuators, that you send curves through them that will enable people to think they're turning further than they actually are. So you can get them to rock and things to keep them going. So in a sense, if I'm going to turn somebody, say 180 degrees, so I'm going to turn them all the way around, what I'll do is I'll actually do the first pivot tilt, and they'll tilt the actual simulator itself. And then I'll actually use a curve, just a standard animation curve you'll see in Unity. And I'll be sending those figures to the individual actuators and keeping the simulator doing this sort of thing. So what you actually think is, if you pitch it into the actual world that you're actually seeing, is you're actually turning a 480. And in all the experiences I've created, I've not had anybody motion sick. After they've been heavily tested, because the initial experiences I usually make are me sitting in it getting sick as a duck, because I'm like, I want to try this new racer concept, and I'm going to see how this works. And The best one was I forgot to put in a stop on one of the actual games I was creating. I was creating a pod racer thing, and these arms they're big. They're made of metal. They're quite heavy. They swing about if you let go of them, so you kind of have to hold them. And I forgot to put a stop switch into the actual game when I was testing it. So of course this thing's racing off, and I'm going along like this, and the simulator's doing this sort of thing, and I'm like, okay, this isn't feeling right. I'm going to change this. Then suddenly realised I have no stop switch to stop the simulator. So I'm sitting in there with these things like heavy arms, just doing this, and there was no locks on them then that locked them out or anything, so you couldn't lock them out. And I literally had to try and climb out the motion simulator as it's moving while trying not to get hit by these giant metal articulated arms. Yeah, super fun.
That's hilarious.
I think making yourself sick in VR is like a rite of passage. I think the most over the top one I ever did is I was experimenting with ideas, and I was like, you know what happens if I made a grenade and threw myself? And so, throwing yourself across the map and then seeing yourself lurch, it's like, yeah, that's not ready for prime time as an idea,
No.
As you're like bowled over on the floor sick, going, yep, probably not a good idea.
It's so many little nuances and stuff. Like, think of if you were to play something like GTA and you're going to look at it in VR, the whole process in a first-person shooter where somebody gets into a car and they just kind of get in and all the rest, you see the camera pilt down, and usually even in just a straight first-person shooter, a pancake game outside of VR. I love that term now. I'm going to use it all the time. You would still not do too much with the camera, because even on just a straightforward first-person shooter with the actual screen, you'd make somebody sick. Now, I've seen a lot of people where they're getting into a car, so they follow the camera all the way down and into the car, and immediately people get sick because you're changing the height and the latitude of the person in the actual simulation, and they're done for, basically.
What's funny too is it also kind of works in reverse, because something I noticed when I first started doing these kind of experiments was that people are trained with the rules of games prior to playing VR. So one of my favorite moments was my friend John was playing VR for one of his first times, and it was the Razer Hydra, one strapped to your head, one in your hand, and he's basically testing this shooter demo. And at one stage, like a bunch of soldiers come out and they're shooting at him, and I'm like, duck, you're being shot at, duck. And he's like, how do I duck? And he's like, mashing all the buttons. I said, how do you duck? You duck. That's how you duck. And it's just, it didn't even occur to him. He's like, oh, right. And then he falls on the floor, and then he's in stitches. It's like, he gets it now. But it just showed how, even though he's ducking and whatever, it never occurred to him that the way to duck would be to literally duck.
Yeah. Yeah, seen that.
Actually, I do have one thing, because you're talking about the rotation stuff. That kind of reminds me of, have you done much with redirected walking? Because it kind of falls into that same category, right? Where you sort of falsify the amount of rotation someone's providing. I thought that's a really fun topic. I think a lot of people who've not done VR haven't really heard of that before.
It's very, very cool. You still need a fair space to do it in, because there's limited amount of angles you can actually turn somebody. So for everyone who doesn't know, redirected walking is basically the simulation actually turns you more than you're actually turning in the real world. So I can make it so that you can turn around a corner when you're not actually fully turning, or you actually can push people a bit further without them doing. It's basically using the person's space they have, but making them feel like they're moving in a much bigger area. There's other tricks to the trade with redirected walking, with things like moving people around a corner and actually changing the world that they're in. So I turn the corner and I turn another corner, I turn another. So I'm doing 4 right angles, so I should be back to where I was. But what I do is I actually change the world that's around them, so they actually think, oh, I'm moving into a brand new room, and they don't quite compute, because their mind is telling them, oh, well, you walked further down that last corridor, when you didn't actually walk further down that last corridor. The simulation is pushing you forwards. Now, obviously, there's limits to this, because if you do it too much, a person gets sick. But there's real sweet spots, and there's a lot of universities at the moment studying what are the best occasions for redirected walking. But it's an amazing thing. I've actually been working with a company recently. Well, not working with them. They've let me use their stuff. It's a company called Infinideck, which is infinite.
I remember them. That's the treadmill. Yeah, the omnidirectional. Yeah, I remember that. God, that was cool. I remember seeing that at, was it SVVR or something years ago? Absolutely, a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been around for quite a while. I became friends with the COO, I think is the COO of the company. But they installed one close by, and they gave me a shout and asked me to come down and play with it and put a demo on it and have a go at it. And it's an amazing piece of kit. And that just removes the whole, I need a warehouse or I need just a place to be able to get around these things in a large area, and you could just keep walking and going everywhere. And again, very cool. But yeah, there's the redirected walking.
So you completely have no concept of where you are relative to space. If you want a sort of simplified example, because we were talking about how you're minimized to the angles you can take without making people sick, a simplified version that you often sort of augment it with is, say you have a character go into an elevator. If you know they're reaching the bounds of the space they're in, you'd have them go into the elevator, and when they expect the doors in front of them to open, the door behind them would open, and they're like, oh, wrong door. And then you turn around, and that small thing to them is just like a silly, I'm looking the wrong way. But to you as a developer, you've managed to reorient the entire space 180 degrees to give yourself an entire another room of freedom where they never once felt like they ran out of space. And if you combine that with the redirected walking stuff, you can end up finding natural breakpoints where you cause people to stop and then have to sort of rotate in such a way that they keep in the same location, and it constantly feels like a space is expanding. It's very fun to play with those ideas.
Oh yeah, this redirected view thing too, for anybody who can see the screen watching it, you can kind of see the blue dot on the bottom right corner is like the person, and they're walking, and it looks like they're walking straight, although it's curved. And here I think it's curved pretty tightly because they're at like they're doing a demo somewhere. But in a bigger area, you can curve that enough that they don't really notice that they're walking slightly to the right or slightly to the left, that they're kind of tilting. If you're not paying attention and the visual part's tricking you, it can seem like you're just walking on straight forever, and you can just keep going and going and going like along that wall for miles while you're really walking in circles.
Yeah, and you've got on that one. You've also got the touch concept with the fact you're actually putting your hand on the wall as you're moving around. So again, that emphasizes more of it. And this is Infinideck.
Yeah, I was trying to pull up the Infinideck page, but I don't think it's going to show the video. I guess whatever. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, Infinideck stuff's cool. I never got to try it because the lines to go check them out were always huge, but I always wanted to because they look freaking awesome.
Oh, dude, I'll give you a shout next time I'm going down there, and you can just come along.
Oh, cool. Yeah, they're really cool because it's just like it's this deck where you just run in whatever direction you want. It seems like you just play whatever kind of VR game and do all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, and as it showed there, it's actually the one they used in Ready Player One in the film.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In Ready Player One, the film, there's a moment where he's actually doing a run on a treadmill. It's actually an Infinideck.
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember, back when this first idea was sort of gaining popularity, there was a load of different competitors with slightly different solutions. You had everything ranging from the dirt cheap Wiz discs up to the Omnis, the Virtuix Omnis. And I was actually one of the backers of the Virtuix Omni back in the day, but it ended up working out that the cost of shipping it to Ireland would be more than the cost of the already expensive piece of equipment that I was buying. So they actually sent me an email and said, you know what, we'll just give you a refund. Like it makes no sense for you to have to pay double the price. I said, yeah, okay.
Wow.
The actually just the slidey one, isn't it? I'm going to make sure I get this one right. And you're in a bowl and your feet are sliding.
It's the bowl with slippy shoes. Yeah, that's the one.
The best moment I had with that is I was at E3 and I was meeting one of the guys from that company, and I turned up and they had free going in front of me, and in the middle was this very handsome guy, professional model, basically in there spinning, shooting things, and looking super cool as he was doing it. And being amazing at moving around this thing. And you're obviously like, wow, this guy's had a lot of practice in that, because the two people next to it literally couldn't stand up properly. It didn't help that they were very overweight game execs that basically struggled to stay in the bloody thing. But yeah, they take a little bit of getting used to, those ones. And there was an even worse one at the day, which was a slidey floor. It was a flat floor, and they basically gave you these special socks. And you went on with a special sock. And if you couldn't ice skate before you went on there, it didn't matter because even if you could ice skate, you'd still be falling over all over the place. But the bowl, the virtual
basically, let's make it hard to walk and then cover your eyes. Good luck.
Yeah. It's, in a nutshell, you're like reaching out for the bar constantly. Whereas the Infinideck, I was very impressed that I could just walk around and there's a bar that's around you, and they've actually got a harness now working on some of these things. But there's a bar that's around you, and I didn't feel the need to reach out to it a lot. Like when I first started, yes, and they tell you about it, and they put it in the virtual world and the demos and all the rest. But after a little while, I was just moving around quite happily, and I thought there was going to be lag on the thing coming back because they're moving platforms, they're motorized and all the rest. But no, I was quite impressed with it.
Although the one thing that you can't get across on videos like that, a lot of them are not quiet. Like there's a lot of those. Yeah, like people don't realize that it's a giant motorized system that's sort of trying to react to what you're doing. And so it's not something you could just chill it in the sitting room while your friends watch TV. It's not, it doesn't work like that.
No, and that's with nearly any actuated system or anything like that. Like my whole office that moves and stuff is super noisy. Drives my wife nuts. And same with the simulator or anything like that. Yeah, it's a piece of machinery. Yeah, I love it. It's all good.
I don't know. Now I
always think the hardware space in VR is always one that was really fascinated me. I'm kind of really disappointed about how many different ones, because the unfortunate truth is, if you work in the hardware space and you're trying to build a commercial product, you live and die by the amount of developers who opt into your equipment. And so I've managed to work with a load of people who are either making startups or, because again, I do contracting work too. So something I've done a lot of is the equivalent of trade show demos, where someone says, I have unique hardware, I need some Unity experience to demonstrate what the hell our thing does. And so I get to play with a lot of like fun early product toys effectively. And then a lot of them don't either make it to market or they don't get enough buy-in from developers to be first party into various different products. And so I've seen a lot of really cool stuff that I got to enjoy die because it's so hard to convince people to engage with it. One of my favorites was, it's not dead exactly, but compared to how big it should have been, was Tactical Haptics. Tactical Haptics was just so cool. It's basically now people are raving about PlayStation and the new controller and how it's got this really awesome rumbling, multiple sensored thing. But like, there's loads of ways to do that. And one of my favorites with Tactical Haptics is they have this kind of like 3 or 4 arms that you're holding onto the controller, and the arms are touching your fingers, and those arms will actuate up and down. And what it does is it pushes the skin in your hand to give you a sense of motion. And you wouldn't think it would, but if you're spinning something in VR, and then that you can feel the weight shift in your hand of the items moving, it's really cool. Like, it genuinely gives you a sense of haptics that you don't get otherwise. And then other stuff too, like if you're firing a weapon and it's got recoil, it's not like, unless you have something physically mounted to your arm, you're not going to be able to like pull your hand back. But what it will do is it will shift the weight in your hand backwards that makes you instinctively pull back, and the extra kind of feeling of that will make it feel like a weapon, and you can like dial in the weights of these in the same way. And it was tons of really cool stuff, but you had to basically hold a Tactical Haptics controller and then attach another controller from whatever platform you're on to the end of it, because they didn't have licenses to be first party inside of the touch controllers or the Vives or whatever. So unless you were going to buy one of these separately and integrate it or use third-party software or all of this stuff, and then it ended up just being too much of a barrier for what is really cool technology that should have been given a lot more So
yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of it's price point and all the rest that would just kill these things off, because you just bought a $600 console and now you're going to buy a $300 controller to go with it, and it just starts to get incredibly expensive.
And it's only going to be supported in one game.
The other problem I see with a lot of the industry is you get a hardware company that builds amazing hardware, but they're not game developers or software developers or anything like that. So they're struggling to get somebody to bring in a demo that really shows it in such a good light that you could sit there and go, wow, that's an amazing experience on that particular controller or that thing that's going to sell that product. Like even the pictures you see here, they're nice demo pieces, but are they going to match anything from the actual industry?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So I've mentioned earlier the Razer Hydra. Now, if you've not been in VR since, the DK1 days, you've probably never heard of this. So these things were horrible, but they were really cool, but they were horrible. So they weren't made by Razer. They, Razer, the keyboard and kind of gaming peripheral brand. They licensed and marketed the material, so it looks like Razer. It's got all the Razer branding and logos, but they didn't make it. The company that made it was called 6 Sense. And basically what it was is, at the time there wasn't motion controllers, but one of the options was like, how do you do motion controllers? And this was even before VR was a thing. So you could add gyroscopes and just have stuff rotate, and you've got your 3 degree of freedom, or you can use magnetic tracking. And magnetic tracking, basically, you've got something in the middle that acts as a reference point, and then you can waggle around, and you can use, magnetically detect where you are from the range of it. But that's got tons of other problems with interference and other issues, which makes no sense sitting beside your computer. Long story short, this piece of equipment came out, was a cool gimmick. Nobody really liked it, even though it actually has accurate 6 degree of freedom. It was more accurate than a lot of the alternatives. But it felt like a gimmick. It was too expensive. Nobody bought it. It died out. Then VR started, like years later, as a new big wave. And suddenly these things that had dropped down to $30 and $40 online were skyrocketing in price as people like me were buying them up, going, well, these are obviously important if you want to start getting into VR. Anyway, long story short, that company ends up making this Kickstarter for their next brand of controller, which I was backer number 11 for, by the way. Backer 11 before they didn't deliver the product. But the reason I bring all of that up is that Razer Hydra, if you're talking about product demos, people don't know this. There is a unique DLC for Portal that uses the Razer Hydras. It's a one-of-a-kind, like 40-minute, I think, demo or something, where you physically can control a portal gun by dragging and like sizing portals with it in Portal, like an actual first-party Portal demo. It's really cool. But I think I'm one of the few hundred people who has ever played it, because you would have had to have a Razer Hydra, and you would have had to know it existed, and most people didn't.
Yeah, super cool.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. I remember wanting to get one and trying to get one of those for the longest time, and they were just nowhere. Nobody had them. Nobody had them available. Everybody that I talked to just was looking for one and not selling one. So, pain in the ass.
I went through a phase of really being into the haptic stuff. I went so far as to have a Novint Falcon. Have you ever heard of those?
No.
Yeah.
Which one's that?
A Novint Falcon is another one of those ones. It was older tech that got repurposed once VR got popular again, that most people didn't know about. It's effectively this giant thing that sits on your desk that's got 4 arms that are attached to a small controller. And so you control with this small thing, and then the arms would apply all of that haptic force to you. So it's like you're holding a gun out in front of you like this, and then as you move the gun, it would basically rock back and forth and fight against you as you're using it. So it gave you real haptic feedback. It would give you kickback on the weapons you were using. So they had a gun handle attachment. Yeah, it's that. Yeah. So instead of that orb at the end, so imagine using that orb for a fishing game where you pull back and you throw, and you get actual weight of the thing that you're holding relative to the what it is. So you could actually feel the weight of the fish or whatever, and then as you lift it up, it would throw back. And then with the gun attachment, it would give you actual recoil. And another demo they had was you would move your hand across a surface like a brick wall, and it would move to give you that feeling of bumping along the surface of all the wall parts and everything. So you could really get some positional data out of it that was unlike any other form of haptics at the time. But it worked in this range because it had to only actuate this much.
Small little tiny arms.
Yeah. So it was really, really cool, providing your arm never did more than that much motion. So it works great for a fishing rod and other stuff, but it didn't really scale.
It looks like those sculpting tools that you can get for computers, where you actually have the pen, and it's on the ball, and it gives you that force feedback on the actual ball itself, so you can do decent sculpting.
Same idea. Yeah, this one's a lot stronger. It really did have a lot of heft behind it. That thing was heavy, but it was like I said, it was a fun gadget. But they fell into the awkward territory of how do you attach the haptics to gameplay, and so you can kind of barely see it there. But there's these really horrible tiny silver buttons on the end of that ball, and they meant you to hold that little thing as a controller, and it's the most uncomfortable, horrible little thing. And so they later on realized nobody's going to do that, and so they made an adapter that has a molded gun handle, and it had a trigger. But now you have to deal with how do you have a character walk around and shoot, and so they used pushing and pulling as a walking thing, and it was the most horrible idea in the world. If you used it exclusively as a Time Crisis style shooting thing, it was great. But if you tried to treat it like a game controller, because you could map this like anything else, right? You could map this and play any game in your library. You could play Half-Life 2 with this, and it would be the most uncomfortable experience you've ever played, but you could do it.
Yeah, it sounds pretty terrible. I just imagine playing a gun game where you can't move your hand away from right in front of you, or just like stuck there. Especially compared to every other VR experience.
You basically had to kick the side of it, and it would like flip your rotation around. It was really weird.
Oh. That's some crazy stuff. I'd forgotten about all that old tech. But yeah, stacks of stuff just in the closet. I'm sure you guys do too, though.
Oh yeah. Just boxes upon boxes of old stuff that then gets ripped apart and put in something new.
Yeah, all the past projects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Except for that Hydra, I hated that thing so much because I don't go down a whole big rabbit hole on it, but it was the cheapest made thing you've ever seen. It was on a little plastic base with a rounded edge that was like you'd sit the controllers in, but the depth of that rounded edge was different than the depth of the controllers. So whenever you put it on it, they would slide in or out, and then the very end petered off into an actual sharp line. So sharp plastic at the end that you unironically would pick up and you would slice and cut your arm. Like the fact you could cut your arm on this device that was a consumer grade product was insane to me. And then finally, the base was not weighted down. I'm guessing they didn't want to put magnets in it for obvious reasons, but the idea was that there's no weight in it. So you had these two cables coming from a little stand that's meant to be the magnetic center with a cross in the middle representing your pole. And if you ever pulled too far one direction or the other, the base would just shift slightly. Not much, but just enough that the entire world's perception of your orientation has now moved by like 20 degrees. So in every way possible, it was like, this thing is conceptually amazing, but it's like nobody cared when they made it. And so when I backed the sequel one, supposed to be the Sixth Sense, what do they call the second one? The STEM system. I was like, they finally have a chance to re-engineer all of the usability stuff. This could genuinely be the best VR controller possible. And then after 6 years of not coming out, Oculus comes out with the touch controllers, and it's like, they're done. They're done. Yeah. They're done. We've solved motion controls now, you know?
Yeah, the touch controllers seem to have really pushed it over. That and like the Quest 2 tech seems to be pushing it. Like I see a hard time for anybody trying to compete just with the tech that they've got there.
With the controllers. No, I mean, the controllers are awesome on all of them. And the great thing about Vive is they released the puck as well. So you could attach that and build your own stuff if you really want. You see a ton of them on tennis rackets and cricket
Have they made a new version of that?
So there's actually a Kickstarter that's, I want to say it's just finished by a company called Tundra Labs.
Okay.
They had a much smaller version. And then HTC just done an announcement on their new headsets. And they were talking about it, not Tundra Labs, but they're talking about their own one in that as well. So the pucks are very much still alive. Which is great because I use them on loads of stuff, and like all the guns that I create are all got pucks on them for tracking, and then I have my own Bluetooth systems for firing and all the rest. But yeah, so they're still alive.
Does Oculus have something similar yet?
Nope.
That I know of. No, but they never really cared because that was, to them that was if you look back at the history, like. Oculus was all about mass adoption. Their entire marketing strategy was, we want you sitting in a chair with a comfy headset, with a nice Xbox controller, and like being warmed onto the idea. Valve, meanwhile, has like, right, providing you've got $8,000 and a team, you can deck out a room with laser boxes all over your office, and it works. But the one thing that was really cool,
all you need is a simulator in your back.
Exactly. Yeah. As long as you have like a house free, just one of your spare houses, you're fine. Yeah. So not everyone has that luxury. I will say one thing I always respected though. Valve were always super cool with just giving people hardware. Like you could, if you knew anybody at Valve, anyone at all, you could say, "Hey, I heard you got some new tech," and they'll be like, "We'll send you some out," because they had their own manufacturing, so they would 3D print stuff. So I have in boxes here like 8 varied versions of different Vives of all the different iterative stuff. Oculus, on the other hand, they sent me out a few things, but it was always like curatedly separate release cycles with like scheduled dev stuff, and but those are good times. There's a lot of fun experiments back then.
Every time Oculus sent me something, it was unexpected, and it was just like randomly there was a box with a headset at my door, and I'm like, where the hell did this come from? I don't know why they sent me this. I already have one. It was pretty much the case every time Oculus sent me something. But Vive or Valve, I guess it was Valve was just great with that. That was kind of what pushed me into VR was Valve and the Vive.
Although I will say, No, sorry, guys.
I was going to say, look at their new headset, the Index. They literally put a USB port on the front of it and said, "We don't know what you're going to use it for, but you're going to do something with it, and it'll be crazy. And maybe you want to put animated eyes on the front of your headset, so it looks like you're looking around to anybody on the outside, or maybe you just want to have a screen saying you're busy in VR or something, just rotating on the thing. They're just just do whatever you want with it. Whereas Oculus is like, don't touch our thing."
Yeah, like back in the old days, I remember that being the thing. There was all these 3D mounted versions of the Leap Motion. You could just mount to the top of it. There's so many like hand tracking experiments back then with the Vive, which you couldn't really do with the Rift as easily.
Oh, the Leap Motion was amazing. I love that thing. I've still got like 3 of them sitting out back.
Yeah. It never really worked for me though. My lighting, like, was always that was one of the most temperamental pieces of hardware I've ever used. It was really cool, but like, if the lights are too bright, it doesn't work. If the lights are too dark, it doesn't work. It's like, it's always frustrating.
Yeah, I never got one of those. I always wanted to, but I never got around to grabbing one. I'd played with them at a bunch of hackathons, and every time I was like, "This is pretty cool. I should come up with an idea and buy one." Then I'd never come up with an idea to actually use it.
I was just pretty sold by the time the Touch came out, because I remember I'd had Vives for a while, and I was one of those people who was super sold on the Vive, super sold on the Steam controller, not because I enjoyed using it that much, but because I really enjoyed the idea of a programmable interface, that you could give programmers the ability to make any kind of physical input by changing the way that it responded. And so I was like, yeah, this is such a great idea. But then they had an event over in, I forgot where it was exactly, but basically shortly after the Facebook buyout thing, they flew a load of devs over, and you got to try out like a little curated demo room, and then you'd kind of meet and greet, and then you go and try out the things. And so I got to try the touch controllers for the first time, and they have like a little curated room where you and some other representative were in it, and then they basically put you in the headset, and then it was like, they said, "Oh, try picking that up," and you'd pick stuff up, and you'd like hand it to them, and then you'd play ball back and forth, or you'd like fly a paper airplane. And like, obviously it wasn't just about showing off their cool tech. They were using us as an example to see whether it's intuitive or not. And it was really interesting because it was the first time you ever did the whole grab with your open hand as an actual action because of the inner trigger. And it really struck me as, I never even thought of this. Here's me, extolling the virtues of the wands being this really cool thing. And all of a sudden you've got this idea of like grabbing controllers with finger pointing and stuff. And it's like, yeah, I'll concede this is objectively the best way to do this going forward. And so everything else went out the window after I tried those.
I must have been, I remember going to that event as well. So we probably passed in the corridors and stuff. Yeah, that was an amazing. That was eye-opening. The T-Rex demo, and then just jumping in and then throwing stuff around in a room and just being a little kid again. It was. That was a moment.
Cool. Well, now that we got silent, I thought maybe we could let people ask a couple questions about, I don't know, whatever random stuff, game dev stuff, Unity stuff, VR stuff, tech stuff, machines, whatever kind of stuff people have that they want to ask about. Just allow them to start taking or popping in questions, and I'll kind of watch and pop anything up that seems relevant for you guys. So yeah, if you guys got any questions, go ahead and feel free to ask them in chat. And then I'm getting really thirsty too, so I don't know. Jason's over there with his nice big glass of water. I'm sitting here with an empty can of rock. Sorry.
I'm always prepared to, like, always about 20 minutes before this, I sit down and go to the bathroom, grab a bottle of water, make sure devices are charged, make sure camera's on. Okay, we're good to go.
Yeah, that's normally what I do, but I messed up this time. I went out, talked to my wife, forgot my drink, forgot to grab a snack and everything else, and then came back. Let's see, anything popping in? I haven't seen anything for questions yet, but I just keep watching and check. So Dave, one of the things that you'd mentioned earlier too was the VR real estate stuff. And one of the things you've both done is just a ton of non-game Unity stuff. Like, both of you have worked in a ton in like non-game industry stuff, working on in the actual game engines, right? In addition to games. So I thought it would be kind of interesting to just talk about like what that's like. Like, do you prefer working on games or non-game stuff? And like, what's interesting about working on the non-game projects for you? Like making a real estate thing, or I don't want to spoil some of the other crazier things that might explain why they're interesting. But go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Well, you showed a load in your last YouTube video, I think it was, where you were going through Disneyland or something, and you went on to Lollapalooza and the Super Bowl and stuff like that. So, I mean, I still prefer games because, I mean, I always say I like to make immersive experiences because a lot of the stuff I make, people wouldn't consider games, but you're going through an area and it's arty and whatever. But it's an immersive experience that comes back. Even something like the electric chair we showed earlier, it's not a game. It's just an experience that you go into and enjoy. And that's what I like doing. But don't get me wrong. I mean, I started in the games industry. I worked in the games industry for like 12 odd years. And I still do build games. And I still concept games for companies and all the rest. And that is my love. That's the reason I got into programming. That's the reason I got into becoming a designer and an engineer and all the rest. But the enterprise thing's still always a massive interest. And I've been lucky in the sense that a lot of people have come to me and asked me to build an experience for the Super Bowl or for Lollapalooza, Austin City Limits and stuff like that. And yes, it's not a video game, but the enjoyment you get out of actually just building something that's large scale or even small scale that people still get massive enjoyment out of is what brings it home to me. So I don't know what you want me to, I could go through some of the previous experiences I've done, or what would you like?
I mean, I think it'd be kind of interesting. I mean, part of it, your experience with it is probably a little bit different than some. Like I've done a lot of like enterprise projects where I didn't get to see the end user at all, which really sucks. But in your case, like you're getting to see the end user a lot of the time and like show them something cool that makes them happy and excited, kind of like you do in games, right? Which I think is probably the case for a lot of people that are doing enterprise stuff in Unity. My enterprise examples that were not like that were all things that were like they were like web related stuff. No Unity, no visual at all. So yeah, why don't you share a little bit like what one of those or two, whatever the things you think were kind of cool. Like
okay, so let's mention Lollapalooza. So that's probably the one where you get to see most of the people out there really enjoying it because they're actually with the thing, playing with it or interacting. Can you tell
everybody what Lollapalooza is?
Yeah, so Lollapalooza's a massive music event that happens in the US. It's one of the biggest music events in the world. Thousands of people come down. And we put this system out into their Austin City Limits, Voodoo Fest, and all the big music festivals throughout the United States. What the experience is we actually created, it was about 3 stories high, and it was a 4-sided tower. And it was just covered in screens on every side. And some of the screens were augmented reality. Some of the screens were more informational. So there was a screen that would basically go, this is the schedule going on. There was a screen that was an interactive map. You are here. And it would actually alter itself to show you where everything was. And then the one that really got everybody's attention was one of the sides was a big funhouse mirror. And we programmed Snapchat filters and funhouse mirror filters and all the rest into them. And we built a camera into the side of the thing. And you'd get all these people, half of them probably drunk, turning up and suddenly realizing they're on camera to a giant 3-story monitor standing in front of them. And this monitor's playing with them. And we had somebody sitting off to the side who was actually had a tablet. And he was like, all right, I'm going to make this person do this. I'm going to make this person dance. I'm going to do this. And they'd put up instructions or whatever, dance, have fun. And this thing would just go crazy. And they'd be walking along and suddenly a little bird would land on their shoulder. Yeah, so there's my website, Warped Imagination.
This is the one, right?
Shameless plug. But this is the tower, yeah. So, yeah, play it. It's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, I'll just let it play while you're talking. People can see it.
Yeah, so as you can see,
this is a thumbnail. It's super clickbaity.
No, yeah. I mean, it was an advertising company, but yeah, you can see people are actually here reacting with the screen. There's actually a social media integration into it as well, so it would come up. The Lollapalooza art style is incredibly weird. These are all branding things that we got to actually put up there, so don't judge me on how the map looks. That's them. but yeah, you'd be able to go up, the schedule will come up. Here's the social interaction. So if you posted to Twitter, you posted to Facebook, it would actually absorb that stuff in and then post it onto there. These are people in front of the funhouse mirror. Snapchat filters come up. We actually also changed the way that a lot of the sports teams did their kiss cams. So when you'd be on a kiss cam, as before, it'd be like kiss, kiss, kiss. What we done is we actually pulled that in and put filters over it. So we give people funny heads and all the rest of it. So if you're wondering, if you're at a US sports event and you're seeing the kiss cam come up and now it's just augmenting the crowd and you're thinking that's a terrible thing, why have they integrated Snapchat into everything? You can kind of blame me and my team because that's what we did. But everybody has the super fun time.
What kind of tools do you use to build all this stuff?
So this is Unity. The way we actually do the towers is that's actually one single instance of Unity playing. What you can actually do with Unity, each camera can actually shoot out to a different display. So we didn't even do a full single display as the 4 sides. We actually had each side playing as a separate display. And then we'd pull things in and then actually pump them out in different ways. For some of them actually run 4 different engines, but most of them would actually just run the 4 different displays that come out. And this thing was basically meant to run for about 24 hours a day, every day for the whole event. So it couldn't have downtime or anything for the most parts. So you had to do garbage collection cleverly. So the garbage collection is integrated to the way the animation system runs. Fortunately, somebody had to be there most of the time to change up filters and do funny things with them because you want to see who's there and you want to play with them and send them messages and stuff like dance or wave your hands or do whatever or do a logo of a team that's coming up or whatever for the sports teams.
And it's a one-time event, so you want to be there live. You can't practice and prepare it.
Yeah.
And have it automatically do it and just hope you want to be there. So you guys have like a whole control station or like an app so you could control it separately then?
It depended on what the actual thing was, but most of the time, there was a control station because we used to run the broadcast. So whenever you go to these events, you'll see all the caravans or RVs that are off to the side with loads of wires coming out them as satellite dishes. We'd basically be in one of those shacked up because we not only run this, but the displays to the side of the music events, or if you were in the Super Bowl, for instance, and you looked up anything social that came on the screen in the Super Bowl was the company that I helped build. And I was the CTO of, and basically that would be us, and there'd be a poor guy, usually a really nice guy called Tony, who would sit in this caravan somewhere, literally pressing buttons and changing things up to do things, because a lot of times they're constantly changing. They're like suddenly the schedule changes, and a band can't go on, or a band's going to come on late, and you have to change these things up and keep the things going. But it was super cool, and it was at the point that Snapchat was just coming into the world, so everybody was getting into filters. I don't own Snapchat. I'm not into filters. I barely ever come on camera. This is a unique thing for me. But we built them and had them displayed to this stuff, and it came across.
And I can honestly vouch for it without saying any companies in particular. A good 30% of the various clients I've worked with at some point have asked for some ingrained variant of Snapchat filters on all of their stuff. The big ones are client want to be able to paint things in VR. They want to be able to have Snapchat filter stuff in VR. And then there's usually interactive music stuff. Those 3 tend to be very big requests from. And also social integration. There tends to be a big request for can they email this to their friends, or can they send this, click a button and tweet it out or whatever. Which is always, it's easy enough to do in terms of the code. It's literally just to consume some API. The hard part is you have to then describe to a lot of these people, no, but if you want social stuff, you usually have to pay for a server and manage all of that stuff yourself. And that's where they kind of go, can you just make it work? And it's like, we can, but now you're trying to either build a web API client and all the other stuff and hire people. Are you okay with that? And then they kind of go, is there a cheaper option? We can email it. It's basically, so that tends to be one of the big things, is finding that line between how much social engagement they want versus how much plumbing and architecture and stuff is required to make it work.
And Vixie was a big team. Well, not big team. We had about 12 people, and it started with just me. And I remember the interview for the actual job. I walked in, and they were like, "You've just done this stuff at the Indiana Pacers. We loved it. can you do this? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I built this prototype and we played with it, and suddenly it's an NFL game. But yeah, we ended up building a fairly substantial team, 12, 20 people working for me, building that stuff out. Great team, absolutely amazing team. And they're still going. It was a company called Vixie that was under a company called The Famous Group. The Famous Group has now absorbed that back in. Awesome company up in Culver City in LA. By the way, for people, I do have an English accent, but I do live in LA, so I work in LA with a lot of the studios up in that way. If anybody wonders why I'm just doing US stuff all the time. But yeah, as you say, it's not a small project for these social integration. It tends to be back-end servers. So you've got server guys sitting there. Then you've got an integration UX that's actually working with the server just for the tools to get the stuff up there, to put the social stuff up there. And then you've got the developers and the artists that are building the experiences in the engine that you see that they can move around in and do whatever.
So if you're going to build all that, can you just make a Facebook for your clients too? Just make their own version of Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat. Just kind of like combine them all together, though.
I did have a client who literally wanted us to make Pokemon Go. I did have a client once who literally wanted us to make Pokemon Go for them, and we're like, "You want us in 3 months to make a bespoke Pokemon Go for your project? No." And you want to do it for the budget that costs less than one member of the team for 3 months.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we all have stories about the person that rang us up and said, "Oh, can you create League of Legends for us?" or something like that. And you're like, no. Like, I mean, I always say to him, I can create anything you want with the right amount of budget. If you've got a huge budget, then cool. Yeah, I'll create it for you. But you better have a massive budget for that one, because that's going to cost you.
Yeah. I get them. I've had them plenty of times in the past. But I figure we should jump on to a couple questions. I think a few have stacked up, so just go through them real quick. The first was about if anybody is asked about Godot or Godot, like I like to call it. They think it might be the blender of game engines in maybe 5 years or so. I have pretty much no experience with it, and I've been curious, like, from other developers. Every now and then I talk to somebody who says they used it a little bit, they tried it out, and then they kind of switched back to using Unity or Unreal. That they thought it was cool and good for something, but not quite what they needed for their specific project. I don't know enough about it, though, to really speak to why or anything about it. So,
yeah, same. I mean, I've used other random engines like Ogre back in the day, but none of them really stood the test of time, or Box 2D for certain things, or I've used some of the ActionScript stuff, but it's not. I've never really used Godot myself. I've heard people who use it quite like it, but it seems to be it's not like a niche fan base. It's just not something I've ever had the reason to use.
Yeah, in fact, I do a lot of OC indie stuff and just indie forums and stuff like that. And Godot seems to be getting bigger and bigger, and I know a lot more people that are building in it and enjoying it. There was a great game, and I want to bring it up so I don't butcher the hell out of it. It's a game called Gravity Ace. It's a corridor shooter, indie title, done by a guy called John Watson, good friend of mine, and he uses Godot. Absolutely loves Godot, and built tools so users can generate their own levels. It's top-down corridor shooter. Super fun, super retro, which is what got me into it. I don't know about everybody else. But he rants and raves about it. Yeah, there we go, Gravity Ace.
Gravity?
Yeah, it really, really good game if you like corridor shooter style games, which took me back to the days when I was playing on the Amiga and stuff like that. But the graphics on this and the gameplay and the physics and everything are just so much better. But yeah, he primarily uses Godot with a few other guys from a group that a group of friends that I hang out with. There you go. He'd done his terrain engine and all the rest of it. All in the background.
Nice.
One engine I'd love to get around to trying at some stage, I just haven't had time, is all the Pico 8 stuff. Like, everything I've seen in Pico 8 looks really fun. Like, it looks like a really quick to pick up and produce something cool in kind of... if I was doing game jam stuff, if I had more time to do game jam stuff, I would probably end up actually taking the time to learn that, because I think it would be a really fun thing to do game jams in. But again, it's on the long list of things to get around to someday.
Yeah, I remember, a lot of people ask me why I use Unity rather than Unreal, and it's there's a really strong fan base for both that have a go at you if you're using the other one and not if you're using that one. And but for myself, I got into Unity. I mean, I used Unreal back when I was at Sony back in 2000. But you were at Sony, Jason, as well.
Early 2006.
Yeah. And we used Unreal then for a little bit, but then I got into Unity because I was doing a lot of mobile games for Windows and stuff like that. And
it was mobile games what kicked me over to Unity too.
Yeah, and I never needed to leave that. I mean, I built 2 indie games companies using Unity. They worked out really well. I never left. And some people go, "Oh, well, the graphics." It's like, oh no, not really. There's not that much of a difference between the two if you really dig down deep and really get into it. And a lot of times the art style you're using when you're in indie anyway really doesn't make a difference to that sort of level. And Godot's awesome as well. And Construct. I know a couple of people that use Construct a lot for mostly game jam stuff. You mentioned game jams earlier. Vimlark, the guy who makes monkeys with guns, that was originally in Construct. Until I rang him up and said, "Look, dude, just let me build the engine for you. I want to build monkeys with guns with you." And I ended up taking that on with him. Great guy, Vimlark. I took that on and brought that into Unity.
Actually hanging up over there.
Yeah, I know you're doing stuff with him now. And and I brought that into Unity away from Construct just because I know Unity a lot better. I could get it done really quickly, and it was something I wanted to get done quickly, so I could push it out for him. But yeah, there's no reason people shouldn't try all these different things and find out what you like. I mean, for instance, people have a go at me because I use GIMP instead of Photoshop, and everyone's like, "Oh, how can you use GIMP? It's a nightmare." And I'm like, well, I kind of got used to it when I was trying to cut down all the costs of building indie titles way back when I was indie, and I went to that instead of Photoshop because Photoshop's price was extreme back then, and I never really moved away from it. I used Blender for a time, but I went back to Maya because I used to build tools in Maya as a living, and I just got so used to using Maya that Blender hurt me quite badly when I switched over. But now I hear, now they've got the Epic grant and everything, it's so much better.
I think that's one of those things too that a lot of people miss. It's one of those like scales with you as a company. Like I used to use, very similar story, except for me it was Pixlr. So you know Pixlr? Yeah, it's the web-based image editing software. It's free, it's awesome, it does everything you probably need for your average indie title. But what tends to happen, and I was exactly the same guy, I used to use LibreOffice, used to use all the other free alternative various tools and software, the cheap ones. But when you get to the point that you start to scale up and you have more people and a larger team and integrations with various different stuff, it just gets to the point that these bigger software suites are designed to interoperate in a way that's just so unbelievably valuable. Like a good example of this is I was doing some stuff with Premiere this weekend, and you can press a button in Premiere and it will take your entire audio from your video, move it into Audition, put the video in the corner, and let you mix and master the audio to the video with all of the effects you applied in Premiere in the audio tool. Now, if you can use Audacity and get 70% of the way there, you can use, anything from Final Cut to whatever other solution you want. But if you want to move stuff, you're saving out files, you're moving them to the next one, you're editing it, you're bringing them back. And so the reason why a lot of people end up, if you have a big company or you're working on large projects, you eventually end up coalescing into the same, either the one set of tools or another, is because they have interoperability. They have tools designed to work together. So it is the unfortunate truth is that a lot of people go, I don't have the money to pay for these big tools big studios use. It's like, well, yeah, but you won't until you're big enough to use them. And so most people will tell you the same thing. They'll use the cheap tools until they're big enough to afford it. And the day I could officially buy my Adobe license for free, or buy my as opposed to using it for free, it's like, it was a good feeling to go, I can legitimately call this a business expense and I legally own Adobe software. That's a nice feeling. So yeah, it's one of those, it's just a cycle, I think. I think everyone goes through it.
Yeah, very much so.
There's another question here about some VR project I've never seen, but it looked like it was a kind of like a treadmill thing. I was kind of curious about it. It looked like a 2-directional treadmill. This Aperium Vr. Have you ever seen that, Dave?
No.
What about you, Jason? Nothing? Yeah, it looked
Me.
It looked different, but I've never seen it before.
Yeah, there's there's a company's name that's going to elude me something terribly.
For everybody, what it looks like.
I can't remember. Yeah, they're actually using this treadmill in their thing, and they do you can walk through Egyptian tombs or something, and they use this particular treadmill for it. And it's just a
3D scan one, right? I may have seen that video, but I've not seen the treadmill. Yeah, it's like a 3D scan. Yeah, exactly.
And I think they're using this treadmill because I can tell the sides look exactly the same, which is making me think that was definitely there. I've not tried this one. If it's just literally walk one way or walk the other way, then yeah, I mean, there's obviously some, like you can make one of those remember those old cop shooter arcade things where you pick up the gun and it would take you through the actual thing. You'd be shooting the various people as you go along. You could easily make that one of these just as a walk forwards effect. But
yeah, I could see that. I feel like the problem with them all is just the amount of space that they take up, and then the liability when you have random people going in there that are just going to constantly break things and hurt themselves. Like it'd be hard to put one of those up anywhere and have it be profitable, right? I always wonder how those places do it, like where they have the little simulators set up for VR out like in the mall and stuff. I don't know if you guys have seen those, or before COVID hit, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When I built a company called Auto Mechanics, and that was hardware and software. That's where the simulator comes from and all the rest of it. And it was location-based entertainment that we were looking at, LBEs. And these are your new age theme parks where you go up and you've seen the Jurassic Park ride and things like that. Can't remember what the cafe or whatever the bar is called that they put them up in. But they're 6 people jump in, they experience Jurassic Park, they got their little shooters and they're walking about. And that went hugely profitable.
Yeah,
and it's the same with a few of these other experiences that have gone out.
And those ones, they're strapped in, right? They're like nice and safely strapped in, not walking around where they're going to fall on their face.
Now, there are things like Sandbox Vr, which is a walk-around experience with guns where you're going in and you're fighting off against other people. They got about, I think it's like 16 million in investment from a load of movie stars and music stars. Just before COVID. So I don't know what the state of them is now, because a lot of things shut down or went a little bit quiet for all that thing.
Pretty cool because the out of office. So just a small note on this. People always kind of anticipated the out of home entertainment is what it's called. This category of stuff was going to be the big seller for VR because, to tell the truth, like, aside from super fans, a lot of people are not going to be comfortable with like all of the space and stuff required for VR. And on top of that, like it genuinely, it can be an exhausting thing to put on all of this stuff and go through all of the effort. And so I very quickly kind of learned the lesson that I don't think those kinds of treadmills really make a lot of sense to me personally, because to me, it's like there's 2 separate audiences. There's people who want their at-home VR gaming, and then there's like balls to the wall, big, full, out-of-home entertainment environments and spaces. And for those, you've got stuff like this. You've got like the proper room with multiple different cameras and setups and backpacks, and you've got rooms designed to give you haptic feedback and all of this stuff that goes with it. And it strikes me as you'd go one or the other. I just don't see a lot of value in sort of the halfway house treadmill approach anymore.
Yeah, and the funny thing is when you look on a lot of the websites for these companies now, they're very much heading towards enterprise and XR training as well, to diversify what they're doing. They came out as primarily a games sort of augmentation device, but now they actually are looking at it and going, actually, if we go XR training as well, we go and do things for the big companies, the military or whatever, we diversify our portfolio and we can really start making money on the side of those. So yeah, you've seen a lot of diversification for a lot of these companies now. And you've got companies like The Void as well, which was partnered up with Disney for quite a while.
The Void have done some really great stuff. Yeah, I think they're the first people to really sell the idea of like it can be a ticketed experience. You can just go and pay for like a unique VR experience. And I think they really did a good job with that.
They did. I think that Vegas probably did a slightly better job because they came in second. And they had a ridiculous amount of money because I've done like this one that's on screen here. I've been to this place and it's pretty crazy. Like they just have a big like you said, a relatively big, giant room that's all set up with an experience that's perfectly mapped to that room. And they've got the backpacks, the staging area, and it's just all kind of like ready to go. And it's an amazing, it's definitely like an amazing experience. And I can't imagine getting the same thing on a treadmill. Like I'm the kind of weirdo that would want a treadmill in my house, like so I could walk around like Dave, like me and Dave and probably Jason, all three of us. But I don't imagine that. Yeah, most people would. Most people want to go do this. They try it out. They do it once, and they're like, "That was cool. Next time I go to Las Vegas, maybe I'll do it again." They don't want it in their house, you know.
It also depends like what kind of experience you want. Like people don't realize this until you start. So again, all three of us have probably demoed VR to a lot of people. Like throughout our lives, we've had people in rows come in and try things, and you very quickly learn that environment is very conducive to that experience. If you have a showpiece, a big dramatic event, and you're bringing people in, it's like any big event. There's a buzz around it. People are energetic and happy to try it. But if you were to set that up in the corner of their house, they'd be like, oh, I have to go put on the thing and sit in this stuff. And people just immediately lose interest. And so you find a lot of VR, even just putting on a headset, it's an ordeal. It's not a big ordeal, but it's like you have to stand in a space, put it up, set your space up, get ready, and sort of you have to be willing to engage in a large experience. And you'd be surprised, gamers don't want to do that. Usually the whole point of you gaming is to just like grab a controller and sit back and relax, or, you know, sit up and play with your friends on a PC or something. You're not... The idea of you sort of strapping into your suit prior to beginning your gaming session is actually like, you'd be surprised that constitutes a very small part of the audience. And so people are more likely to, you're more likely to do that if you're out with friends and there's like a big event and it's like a fun fair or something than you would at home. So there's actually not that much market for consumer grade kind of engaging VR stuff.
Which is why the price points are all huge when you're looking at this gear.
Yeah. On that topic of making it easier, though, there was this question that popped up, and I thought Dave would be perfect to answer it, saying, are there any special considerations for making a home VR studio? What can be used to pre-hang the VR helmet? Or are there any other conveniences that may not be obvious? So, obviously, this isn't going to apply to everybody. This is going to apply to us weird devs, but you want to give...
Very quick tip. VR covers. So if you haven't heard of them, VR Cover produces these like little wrap-on face mat stuff, and you can get ones that are really good at getting rid of sweat, or really good that are like softer ones or whatever else, and then disposable ones or whatever. So the point is, if you've got a room full of people and you're going to demo to 10 of your friends, have a few beers and play some, you know, various like... I remember playing Audio Shield with a bunch of friends, and we were all just sweating buckets because it's like we're playing like the One Punch Man theme and Skyrim theme and just punching the air dramatically, and everyone is just absolutely buckets of sweat. You're like, okay, this is disgusting, because not only do you put on the headset and it's like dripping wet from the last person, the screen fogs up and it's a whole mess. So if you have a home studio and you intend to show it off to people, have a nice stack of replaceable covers for the top portion and some nice little wipers to clean the screens with. It's mandatory.
Yeah, and especially in days of the pandemic, it makes it even more sense to actually do it. And wipe down the lenses as well is super important, because the amount of things you can contract via your eyes is maybe I'm a germaphobe, I don't know. But no, yeah, VR covers, they're amazing. I mean, they've been around for ages now, since DK1.
DK1 days, yeah. I remember seeing them going, what the hell are these for? And then like a few months later, I'm doing my first demos and I'm going, that's a genius business. I can't believe I ever doubted them being a valuable business.
And you could see, I mean, with the adoption of things like the Index has a removable cover, magnets. You can remove it off, you can put on another one, and you can get going while you're cleaning the other one. There's a whole industry now that's built around cleanliness for VR. You've got there's a company that builds UV boxes. You take your headset down, you put it in the UV box, Clean Box, I think is the company name, and it will just disinfect the entire thing. There are sprays now for if you get sweat on the headset, they'll just drip off the headset, and you can clean them down really easily as opposed to the others. Now, as far as
hydrophobic sprays, that's the one. Yeah,
that's the one. Yeah. So building a home studio, there is levels of craziness you can go to. I am on the very extreme. Shameless plug, you can go to Warped Imagination on YouTube and see the crazy extreme. In fact, there's a video on there now. I don't know if I told you, Jason, I put something up because people kept asking me about it.
You want to drop a link in the chat and I'll pop it up and we can show it while you're telling everybody what it is. I had to go grab my American breakfast. my ice cream bar in Rockstar.
There you go. So
pop the sucker up. All right.
So this doesn't actually go through the VR studio as such. I do a lot of things that are both seated and standing experiences for various clients or my own projects or my own companies. So I like to have an ability to move my whole entire development area up. So this is actually what I see when I'm talking to everybody here. And you've got my computer on the side there that's wall mounted. And then the whole thing moves up and down on these part of pistons, basically, piston system that I've built into it, actuators. Now, you can actually see the VR headset there in the image. And if I put it down on my camera, I have VR headsets here that pull down, and they're actually on magnetic connectors as well, so you can snap them off and hold them in. Now, I've done various different ways of laying these out and having them, whether they be pulleys or retractor lines or what have you. I had wire rope across all of my ceilings at one point that I could hang a pulley off of. And this is the construction I did to actually build the thing, which goes a little bit too extreme. The best thing I've done for VR as far as wired headsets are concerned are picking the exact right retractors and putting frictionless pulleys, mountain climber pulleys. And what I've done is I've actually mounted a pole system. And you won't see it in this video. I'll do another video because everybody keeps asking me about that. I've got a pole system that's mounted to the wall, and you can pull this pole out, and then you can actually pull the headsets down off of that, and the wires go through the top of the pole, and then they come down, and then they retract back. Now, a very cheap version of that is if everybody's ever gone to a hotel and you've just washed your clothes or something, and you want to hang them up, there's these little clotheslines. And if everybody's ever wondered why there's these little pull-out leads that you get out of the walls, and then you can connect them on the other side in the bathrooms of the hotel, they're these little clotheslines. Now, it turns out that a lot of those are exactly the same friction, they've got the same pull that can lift a headset's weight. So you can actually attach them, and here's the actual retractor cable here, actually attach them, and they lift and keep the actual headset perfectly where you stop it every single time. So there you go. You put it down.
I'm getting flashbacks. I've got a Ronin DJI 2 gimbal over there, and it just thinking of the fact of getting the balance just right reminds me of like the 20 minutes it takes to go, okay, that axis is fine. Okay, that axis is fine. The idea that, because I'm just imagining that, I don't know how you got that to weigh perfectly, because to me, all I picture is if you ever strap a single extra thing onto the end of that headset, suddenly it's like you can't get it to hold correctly. So I don't know how you manage that.
I have different retractors. So I went on Amazon and bought a stack of these different retractable cables. So everything from your keychain retractors that people wear on their belts. I don't know why, but they wear on their belts. And then they pull their keys out and they can do whatever, all the way up to the industrial grade ones that people put on in workshops to hold tools. So you can literally hold a power drill or something like that in one place and then move it out the way. So I bought a selection of different ones of those. And then I made everything in my office modular. That's why I have rails everywhere. So I can mount anything I want onto it. So I can just change the retractor out, put a different retractor on if I'm currently holding that. I have weaponry as well, as I've mentioned before. Now, doing VR development over hours where you've got a strap around your head and you're holding this gun constantly as you're doing it, starts to get heavy. So I put retractors on my ceiling and I can actually just put that there and then go in. And it's the same with tripods and stuff.
I used to have the Delta 6 rifle. I had the same thing. And that thing was a real nightmare. It was cool at first, but after a while, you're like, this giant thing. It's just, the weight gets to you when you're like standing up doing VR for 4 hours.
The same with the arms on the simulator. Getting in and out of the simulator every time I want to do dev became an issue. So what I'd done is I made it so that I could wheel the actual simulator out, which is on wheels, funny enough. It's on a massive industrial wheelbase. And I can wheel that over to the actual screens here, and then my keyboard can come out of my actual system. So I can pull my keyboard system out, and then I could actually develop and push it back against the wall and then in and do the various bits on the simulator, and then come back and then stop it and then do the bits again.
So being able to modularize that as well is just super useful. But it's an extreme version of VR development environment.
But what I will say is what's really funny about that is I am the exact opposite. I do VR development every few months, but they're all in a drawer over there. Not a single headset's plugged into my computer. And if I can get away with the most amount of time before I have to plug in the headset, I will. So what I do is I work out the system designs. I split it up into units and components. I will do unit tests in a C# project without even Unity being open. And once the systems work, I'll draft them into Unity. I'll then make a third-person character controller or a first-person character controller with kinematic character controller or something. And I will make sure the systems like raycast and stuff work with just WASD and clicking around. And then when the systems work, I'll make a Unity package. I'll make a brand new VR project, import just that bit, and then because I know all the systems work, then all I'm doing is the integration testing. And that way I only have to expose sliders and values, and I only do the VR bit as a mastering session at the end, because I used to do the dev stuff the way you're describing it, but it used to just kill me that you'd want to tweak something and go, okay, now we press build, now we get the headset, now we put it on again, now we wait for the Oculus services to connect, now we double check the batteries are connected to the controllers, now they're all connected, okay, yeah, that waved correctly, put it down, take off the headset, dude, it's I couldn't keep doing this to myself, so I don't know how you can have this cycle of constantly being in and out of VR.
Oh yeah. Once everything's comfy and you can pull things down, and I've got rechargeable batteries everywhere that just literally slot in and slot out, and that's one of the reasons I use the wired headset before I chuck it onto the Quest, because that used to be the annoying thing until you could now just plug in the Quest straight into your computer and do it via that cable.
And now you can do it all wirelessly, right? Doesn't it work on Wi-Fi?
That's right. Yeah,
you can.
It's 120 hertz. Yeah,
I haven't tried it yet, but.
I haven't done that either. I do the wired one, I do the USB-C cable myself. And I will say, credit to them for that. Being able to plug in the USB-C cable and actually have the one to test Quest builds on PC, unplug it, then do the test for real. Yeah. It's so much easier than it used to be.
So much nicer, yeah. Oh yeah, because I get it, doing a build and then transferring it over to the headset. Same as when we were first doing mobile games, and you're like, okay, I've got to do the build, and then I've got to transfer it over to the phone. Then I load it up on the phone. I forgot to change that color.
Yeah,
that reminds me. Do you actually? Here's something that this is so funny to me. I always love when this happens. One of the clients I was working with introduced me to something I'd never heard of, and it completely changed things for me. I'm curious if you use these. I used to do the old, export out an APK and either drop it on myself or use file transfer or something and send it over and then make a build. Mm-hmm. But there's loads of these test flight style applications people have made where you can upload your APKs to those and then set an app up that's like a host app on your VR headset and then just deploy it. It's that makes so much sense. Why was why was I sending all of these damn APKs over when I could have the clients have their own builds? I could push a build I do this CI stuff in normal projects. It never occurred to me to do it for VR. And so that was such a game changer for me to save this little bit of extra build time.
I automated all these CI stuff. Just, the build would go up and then I'd have a post-process kick off and just boop, 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 and then I'll be like, all right, great, I'm in, I'm going. Yeah,
they're super handy for when you give it to non-technical people too. I give when I had to give it to CEOs and stuff like that of the company, or people that just were not super technical. Then giving them a link that they could just click on from Test Flight, which was literally the one that we used to use. They just send them an email and they click the link and the thing would install and run, and they didn't have to figure anything out. They didn't have to explain what APK meant or what a file extension was or any of the other stuff. Just give them a link and it worked.
Yeah, we had a Google Drive folder, or was it a Dropbox folder? I can't remember. But again, we're talking about mobile rather than VR. But we'd literally drop it when you'd done the build. It would actually build to the folder that was shared, and then the person would actually just pull up their phone and they'd have the shared drive and they'd just click the APK, do the install, and then they'd go straight away. Because and with VR and stuff like that, turning around to an artist and saying, okay, you've made a change in Unity, you could just press build and check it out yourself. That's asking for trouble half the time you want to do it. But if you automate,
especially if the first step is make sure to open source tree and pull down the latest commit first, it's okay, now you've completely lost me.
Yeah, and back at Sony, we built Perforce tools. As one of the things we used to build. And
God, I hate Perforce so much.
And artists used to
despise it. Designers used to despise it. So I remember I spent probably a good few months just integrating Perforce to everything. So nobody would ever open a Perforce user interface again. They'd literally just open Maya and it'd be like, you haven't got the latest. And you'd go, okay, press the button and it would get the latest for them and it would be done. Or the art director would be like, I need to see what the latest stuff is. And they would literally just press a button, get latest outside of all the Perforce, and everything would come in and everything would work for them. And they wouldn't have to do any of the checking in, checking out or anything like that. Because it's a nightmare. And then you add on to that, you have to do a build and stuff and you're starting to lose people in the process. And automating that. So again, we're talking about a small team to a large team rather than just the small indies who just have to wear every hat known to man to be able to produce half this stuff.
I feel like this stuff comes when the team gets to like 5-6 people or so. It's like when it's 1 or 2, everything still stays relatively manual, and like the artist just has to figure that part out, right? Like they're gonna know it, and the team's small enough. But as soon as it grows at all, like you want to make that shit as simple as possible.
And I do think it's a bad habit. I think I have to wait as long as I do. So I used to be I probably am still the same. I wait until there's like a 3rd or 4th person on the team, and slowly but surely I've been watching like Chris Lucian stuff, and I'm like, you know what? He does it before he even like starts, and it's like, you know what, I should start doing that more. So I've made it a real point now to start getting more efficient with my starting up processes and make sure everything is build cycle set up before I begin, CI set up before I begin, because once it's done, it's so easy to just press a button and you will be more productive because there's less barriers to getting work done. So I've really taken that on board.
Yeah, he's a good influence there.
Jason, you were a tools programmer for a while at Sony as well, weren't you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was saying, like, when you're talking about the Perforce integration thing, we had a lot of that. A lot of the tools just Perforce integrate so the designers wouldn't get confused. They'd still get confused, go into Perforce and mess it all up anyway. So it didn't help a whole lot. I mean, it was helpful, but it still had to deal with lots of problems. Source control is always an issue in my experience at game companies, just because it's not. For programmers, it's easy. For everybody, or for most programmers, it's easy. But for most people, it's not a normal way to think.
And again, right,
the revisions of your art file.
But this is why to come back. And again, for the people in the chat, it's continuous integration. It's the idea that you make changes and stuff isn't built, added, and done, and there's not like a process where you have to stop and like reconstitute things at the end of it. And this is why, again, why my personal cycle is I automate through my side. So I would create class libraries and I would use MS Build to export the DLLs into Unity. And then I would do the like actual push from Unity through whatever commit or through collab or whatever Perforce they're using. So even that, like, because just as you were saying, Jason, a lot of artists kind of freak out with the whole source control thing. Collab, for all its faults, is a one-click solution that's really artist-friendly because it includes like, large file system solutions and stuff. So I use Git myself over here in my little programmer corner. And then when I'm done, I let the MS Build cycle drop that into Unity, which then gets included as part of my pushes. So there's not a ton of source files. It means the build cycles are faster. The devs don't need to care about code. They can just go in and do art stuff. And then if they need changes, they ask me, I press buttons, do a push, and then they get more features in the code. And so that's how I draw that line. So the commits are only like actual builds, right? The commits in Collab are like each one is a deployable build that goes to CI that makes a build, and that way there's never a like broken build in the source control commits on the art side, right?
Right, and that art side's totally separate then, huh?
Yeah,
the art and design is like doing art and design builds where the code's somewhat separate. That's kind of interesting. Interesting way to set that up. Yeah, I like Collab though for the same reason of it just being extremely straightforward and easy to like and get anybody into it, explain it, and not have them get lost. Aside from the random stupid errors that it'll pop up, where it'll like say that it didn't complete when it completed, or it'll say that it can't do anything, and then you hit the button again and it just works. Aside from those, it's like the simplest and easiest solution to use for source control stuff. I always just recommend it to people if they can't use Git or some other solution, or they're not familiar with or comfortable enough with it yet. Like, start with something simple like that. It's such a huge upgrade over what people normally do, which is nothing, or copying folders or dropping stuff into Dropbox. Is slowly like ramp up, and that collab is a nice.
If you ever find yourself writing _final on a project, stop and ask yourself if _final means what you really think it is.
Or
that's the moment where I caught myself. Oh yeah, it's like
good stuff. So I wanted to go on to tips in a little bit, but first I have to ask you guys a question. Well, there was a question people are asking about your headphones. But before we get on to those, I want to ask if anybody knows what this is. This thing right here. So I'm going to hold it up. Anybody tell me what
gyroscope? I don't know what it's for. It just looks like a gyroscope, right? Like a representation.
So it folds down. If I don't mind pinching my hands, it can kind of like fold down flat like this. And then it opens up. And it goes like out to like that. It can apparently hang on a wall. It's got a screw thingy there. So I'm gonna put it right up there, right wherever my finger is, right there.
I have no idea what it is. Skip. Okay, you just found it in a skip, and you're like, "I've got this thing." It really sounded like you're gonna turn around and go.
I saw it, and I was like, "I don't know what that is. I need two of them. I can put them in the background." I figured out.
I was waiting for the reveal. I thought you were going to say, actually, this was used in. It's like, so no, you don't know either. Yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing it looks like a lamp control, some kind of like. It might have been a metal hanger for around a lamp where you'd put a thing around it. Maybe.
Guess that, but like there would be fire going up here. Like you would have flames here, and the candle would whatever it was would probably fall out. This isn't very sturdy. It's just like a little metal hole there. I don't know. Interesting. I don't know if we'll ever find out. Oh, it's got two hangers there. Maybe I can. You can hang it two different ways, or hang it on a corner. I guess we'll find out one day, or I'll just hang it on the wall, and then eventually we'll find out. Right.
It's not got a hole through the bottom of it, has it? Like one of the points. Is there a hole for it?
No.
No, I was going to say, is it a pendant light of some variety that you could just? Because if it's got two hangers like that, plus no, because you would hang it down.
I don't know. It seemed weird.
I think it's honestly. I think it's because I think the way it looks, right? You've got that the hook at the back with like the two sides to hook onto a wall. I'm guessing you hook it onto a wall in front of you, it opens, and then there's a bit at the top that dangles down something like a lamp or a plant or something. I think it's meant to be a container that holds something swinging in the middle of it.
I don't know, but it's weird enough that it belonged in my background. So
little LED in the middle. Put some magnets on the side of it, electromagnets, and then it would actually just kind of spin in there, going off the metal frame.
Something like that. I need something for it. Did you see my robot over here got a little bandana too? It was a scarf, a Unity one that I got, or a mask. It took me a minute to realize what it was. My daughter had to tell me what it was because it's one of the tube ones, and it's way too hot here for me to ever wear something like that or even see something like that. I don't want something around my neck. While I'm wearing a fucking hoodie, like anyway, outside, like it's too hot. I got to take the hoodie off. So yeah, it's another random Unity thing hanging up there. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up about background stuff and we'll jump onto headphones.
Yeah. So headphones. That's a good question. So what headphones are you wearing actually?
What are you wearing? Are you wearing these? The MX4s?
Doesn't look like the MX4s. It looks like something else.
Body what?
Sony WH 900s.
The 900s, yeah, okay. So they did look like they have the Sony shape, but they weren't the WH4s. I was for a while wearing Parrot Zerks. I had beautiful Parrot Zerk headphones. Absolutely adored them, but the leather gave away on them. So I happen to have these spare. So yeah. These are the ones, and then Blue Yeti mic for my mic. I don't use a headset mic. I have. When I saw the question come up, I went off and dusted a few different headphones out so I can explain my preferences here because I have a few here to go through. So the first thing, the ones I'm actually wearing are the Neumanns, the NDH20s, and these are very reference. So I chose these in particular because, as I was saying, over the weekend I was doing audio mixing stuff, and these are really nice and flat, and being closed back would have a decent soundstage. They're great for doing work, but also like blocking out stuff. As for the microphone, I'm currently using the Mod mic. So this is actually a wireless strap-on mic that you can attach to the side. So they've got a wired and a wireless version of this, and it basically means you have these little magnetic mounts you can attach to any pair of headphones, and you can turn it into a headset, which is really good if you're like me and particularly fussy about your headphones. So that covers these ones, and this is why I wear these. If I'm doing mixing, audio, E-type stuff. If I'm trying to really enjoy something that I'm listening to, that's where I have these boys, the Sundaras. Sundaras are the electrostatics. They're fantastic. Everything's really sharp and vibrant with those, almost painfully so. It gets to the point that some stuff is fatiguing if you're listening for too long on these, but they sound amazing. They're the fun headphones I have. Then we have over here the K712s and the AKGs. So these ones are the best gaming pair of headphones I've ever had. So the beauty of these ones are they're really wide and they're open back. So they're normally, if you've got open back headphones, they tend to be very low on bass, or they tend to be very shallow in soundstage. So they don't really sound great for gaming. For example, we've got the HD600s here, which are probably the most famous open back headphones there are. Although they have custom pads on those, but the basic idea is there. They sound amazing, but the problem is they're terrible for gaming because the soundstage is really small. But these ones, great for gaming. Absolutely brilliant. They sound wide, really just fun. And they're kind of more energetic than these as well. So they're great they have more bass for like gunshots and that kind of stuff. And then these are the best way I can phrase it is intimate headphones. If you need one pair of headphones in your life, it would be probably these. They're kind of like their little brothers. If you can only buy one pair of headphones forever, I would recommend these. That's the HD6XXs, the mass drop ones. They're about a couple hundred, and they will be the best pair of headphones you've ever owned. They will work for 90% of the things you need. There are things that are better for certain things, but like no headphone has ever done all of the things as well as these. They sound great. The quality is amazing. They're just overall the best. But these are like the bigger brothers of them that cost a bit more. And they're a bit flatter. These have more bass to them a little bit, but these ones flatter. Anyway, these are I have like 30 more I won't go through. My point is these are like the go-tos. I would say if you're looking for something that's like mixy, plain stuff, that's this one. If you're looking for game kind of stuff, these are great. There's also other gaming ones up there too, like the Philips one. No, those ones are probably the ones I'd recommend. And then if you just look for general good ones, the 6XXs or the 600s, that family of headphones are great. And then if you're into like really energetic listening, then go for the Sundaras. And I guess that's it. I would recommend things like Godot over there if you're really into the rock music and stuff. But like, I don't know. I usually recommend people, if they're not into the audiophile stuff and they don't already know the answer to these questions, don't pick something hyper specific, because certain headphones stuff just doesn't sound good on. Like I would even say these, the 600s. There's certain artists that sound terrible on these because you can hear the mixing and mastering of tracks on these. So if you're listening on these, songs you already like I like Imagine Dragons. Their stuff's pretty good. I won't listen to them on these because I can hear some of the mistakes in the mixing and mastering, and they don't sound they sound muddier. And it's not the fault of the mixer. It's the fact that music was designed to play on big beefy speakers in clubs. They're not meant to be played analytically, and so they're meant to give you that rumble, and they're not meant to give you the detail. So it actively doesn't sound good on certain kinds of headphones. So yeah, I would say though 6XXs would be my general recommendation. So there you go. There's the headphone tangent.
That's a lot of headphones, man.
That is a lot of headphones.
I had a very different experience. For me, like headphones buying is always difficult because my head is huge. And usually what I do is I'll go to the store and I'll go around and see if anything doesn't give me a headache wearing it for a minute because it's not squeezing my head too much. And the only thing I've ever found recently was the Sony ones, the MX3s and MX4s. And they're always on sale. I see them on Slick Deals all the time. I love them. They sound great. They're super light. Yeah, I got a gray one and a black one now, and they're my favorite headphones by far. They're the only thing that doesn't squeeze my big fat head. I've found other ones that sounded better, but not as comfortable to actually just wear. Take these things with me pretty much anywhere, and they fold up nice and tiny. Somehow, I almost never fold them up anymore, but.
So I really do like those ones, but for my out and about ones, I actually prefer slightly older but version of the same thing. These are the Momentums, the M2s, and they're a lot like the ones that you're holding up. They're a lot like the Sonys. They just collapse a bit more. Now the general noise cancelling isn't as good on these as they are on the Sonys, but these sound slightly better. They're a bit kind of beefier, and I just find I love the controls. They're this nice leather cups, and they have this like little slider here that's really nice. I really don't like that whole touch swipey stuff that's going on the Sony ones. These have a nice these have an actual nice physical button that's really satisfying. So
that's funny. I like the little tap thing because I use it all the time. I just tap. What I do is this: I just swipe forward to skip songs. That's the only thing I ever use it for. That, or I'll like double tap it to pause. Or you can like swipe up and down. It's really weird when I first saw it. I was like, how the hell do you adjust these things? There's no volume, but yeah, you just swipe up, swipe down, left, right. It's really weird, but I got used to it. Again, if anything else fit my head, I might have a different opinion on headphones, but nothing else fits.
I really only wear them when I'm in a call. Like when I'm doing a call with somebody is when I've got them on. Usually I've got the surround sound going in the actual office itself. Driving people nuts. But like when I'm in a call, I put them on so that I don't have the whole echo thing from my voice.
I don't even do that. I just hope that this microphone doesn't pick up the fact that all the audio coming at me. I just do it for my phone.
If any microphone is not going to pick it up, it's going to be that Shure SM7B. It literally won't pick up anything that's like not exactly hugging it, which is great.
I've got to like lick the microphone.
Yeah, to get any sound out of it. I will say though, on the whole like Bluetooth headphones thing, this is just a side note, kind of a personal rant. I have AirPods and the Samsung Buds and like 6 other Bluetooth wireless headphones and these and other ones. Yeah, and I can honestly say I'm never going to buy Bluetooth headphones again. Dun, dun, dun. The reason why is because recently enough, I picked up something called the FiO BTR5. I was looking for one there to show you, but I can't seem to have. I must have been literally using it yesterday. It's one of my favorite things I've ever bought. It's just a little dongle that's a DAC and amp, so it actually sounds great. It's not just for the. But either way, my point is, it is a little Bluetooth device that connects to your phone or whatever other device you want, and you just plug a pair of headphones into it. It turns any pair of headphones into a Bluetooth pair of headphones. It means if you're like me and you collect a ridiculous amount of headphones, I don't have to start collecting Bluetooth headphones because by design, almost every single one of them is going to sound worse than wired headphones because wired headphones don't have to deal with all of that extra stuff inside of it. So this thing, it sounds amazing. It uses all of the aptX. It's you've got Bluetooth 5 for all of the different standards. It's really good. And on top of all of that, it connects to multiple devices. So you've got this thing with like buttons and controls that's got like 20 hours battery life or 15 hours, I think, and it connects to anything. So ever since I got that, like I just don't get Bluetooth headphones anymore. I'm probably going to give away most of these to various friends and family because now I could just pick a pair of headphones and then go for a walk with them. I don't need to like go and get the Bluetooth ones anymore.
But then don't you have a cord running down, or is it just plugging directly in?
Well, it's a little thing this size, you can just clip it to your shop and you can get shorter cables, so you can put it in your top pocket or something. So there is a cable, but like, I mean, let's just say if you're going to spend as much money as I spend on headphones, you can buy an extra cable that's shorter, and then you don't have to deal with that problem, And
if you like the quality matters. The other benefit I have is I'm mostly deaf, so I can't really tell the difference in the sound quality a lot of the time. Like, I don't know, somebody say something, like I'm just deaf as shit. So go deaf, and then you can save a lot of money on headphones. That's my recommendation. I had a recommendation for you guys on VR testing too, speeding up the process. Kids, just have some kids, put the kids in the VR headset, and you tell them.
Seems like a really expensive solution to
the problem. I didn't say it was cost effective. I said it was
Hey, it's kind of like the whole automation thing, right? You have to put a lot of effort up front to get to the point where you can save time later. So.
Yeah.
That was always the fastest development. Like when I can have somebody else, I mean, not just kids, but like when you have anybody else in the headset and you're actually building and developing, or especially like the game designer in the headset and you're able to build and develop, like keep changing and like iterate 10 seconds and new hit play and they're playing it and trying it out. That's always the best, like the fastest, I think, at least for me. Although with a game designer, it might be a waste of actual useful time, where with the kid, it's more utilizing your resources. Right. All right. So I don't know what else we should jump onto. Headphones were pretty interesting. There's a lot on there, but I was thinking we'd jump into maybe tips of the week. Oh, somebody wants to know what the Bluetooth device you suggested was, by the way, Jason. And what was that microphone too? I'm gonna share those real quick before we.
Oh yeah, so this one is called the Mod Mic, MODMIC, and it's by a company called Antlion.
Called what? Antlion?
Okay. Yeah, and they have tons of variants, and they're actually quite cheap. Like if you want the wired one is the exact same thing, only it's got a wire and it's got a little remote control built into it. Same thing. I could theoretically pop that one off and use that one instead, and it's basically just a wired mic that would attach to the side, and that's it's much cheaper, but the idea is the same. It is a good sounding microphone that replaces having to buy a headset, so you can still have a nice pair of headphones, and then you get these little things here. These are like little magnets that stick to the side of your headset, and you just you stick it to the side, you press it in for a bit, you leave it overnight, and then from then on, any headphone you want, attach it to. So you can kind of swap your headphones and swap the mic. And if you wanted to like turn it up, you can do that to put it out of the way from when you're talking or eating or whatever. And if you happen to be like me and are using the wireless one, so this one has a physical button. So if you press up and down, you can kind of change the volume level, or not the volume, but the mute. But for this one, because I can't see it, there's a light here for when it's muting. But what's cool is this comes with a USB stick that you can't see, that's sticking out the side of my monitor, that turns red whenever I mute. So I can just look here and I can see if I'm muted or not, which is very handy. So this one's great. This is really, obviously I've got like the big mics as well, but sometimes when you're working on stuff, this is just much handier for what you're doing. So yeah, Mod Mic, highly recommend it. It's great value. Then the other thing I was talking about, I don't happen to have on me, but it's basically, the company is FIO, FIIO, and it's called the BTR5. There's BTR3 as well, but BTR5 is the really good one. That's the one that it's a bit more expensive, but like if you buy it once, let's just say it'll future-proof you with all phones, which will remove the headphone jack. If you just get one of these things, it's about this size, and you can forever use any device as if it has a headphone with Bluetooth, and it's awesome.
At least until Bluetooth changes and you need a new one.
Yeah, but maybe. But I'd say for 100 quid,
it'll be a long
probably
time.
fine.
Yeah, I think they're going to be backwards compatible to Bluetooth 5 for quite a while.
Yeah.
That is neat.
By that point, we'll just be projecting it into our heads, so we won't really know by that point.
Although I did actually, just for fun, because I'd never tried it before, I tried bone conduction headphones for the first time a few months ago.
Yeah.
And they sound really cool as an idea, but they are just not good. Like, and not only do they not sound good, which is whatever, because it's bone conduction, they don't even do the one thing I thought they would, which is bone conduction. It's like, when you have you put a speaker on a surface and it becomes a parabolic speaker, you're like, that maybe it's the idea that it must be silent until it's touching your head. It is not silent. It sounds like just a bad speaker. People can hear what you're listening to when it's attached to your head. It's like, it's supposed to be bone conduction. Isn't that the point? No one should hear what's like the music coming out of it. But no, so I hear, other than like cyclists maybe who want to be able to still have full awareness, I can't recommend bone conduction headphones for literally anybody. Horrible.
Yeah, I've never had a great experience with them personally. Oh, all right, let's jump on to some tips. So normally I did not warn Dave about this at all, but the last couple weeks we've just been going over and sharing a couple random tips with people watching, just game dev related, Unity related, other stuff. Okay. Sometimes they're really good. Sometimes I got absolutely nothing. Now today I have two medium things. So a lot of times Jason has really good samples though, or really good tips, and then I'll just one time to cut them up and made a video out of mostly Jason's tips.
He's just like, he's just providing new content. Yeah.
Got it. Bam! Like Jason's tips are now the video. I was like, it was everybody's tips, but Jason hadn't had the most by far, and a lot of useful ones. It was the one where I actually learned quite a few different things. So
very cool.
It's been kind of handy. So I just wanted to share two things that were not very technical. The first one is, I guess, a little bit technical, and I just wanted to talk about it. And that was with when people grab like packages and code, like especially I think of like asset packs or packages on the package manager, or just assets that they've grabbed online. What I've realized is that most of the time, or at least a lot of the time, people don't look at the example stuff or the documentation at all. They just kind of like jump in, drop the thing in, and play with it. And the biggest thing I wanted to recommend is, even if you're not going to read the documentation, like maybe you're only going to read the instruction guide, like the getting started guide. I get that a lot of people, that's all they're going to do, and I'm not going to convince them to go past that. But at the very least, go through the different examples that come with the projects. Like when you grab a pack, go through every one of the examples, try them out, play them, run them, see how they work, and see what they actually do. Because I find that a lot of people will grab a pack of stuff. They'll grab some sort of an asset, and it'll do all of these different things, and they'll only use one part of it, and then they'll try to recreate all of the other shit that it does. Like, oh yeah, well, I want to do this and this and this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go recreate this. Not realize there's already stuff that does that in the example.
I can honestly say I've done this exact same thing. The first time I used TextMesh Pro, I was like, this is really cool. I want to do a typewriter effect. So I spent a few hours making it, and then like the third demo is a typewriter effect. I'm like, I should have just checked. Like, just even looked at it once. So yeah, I've literally done that.
Mm.
For me, it was Cinemachine brought this fresh to mind. I was like, oh yeah, just show people these examples real quick. I happened to be doing it in a course. I was like going through showing the examples. It's like, yeah, I wonder how many people try to like recreate a blend between cameras and all this other stuff. Think of like all the other things, and TextMesh Pro was one for me too. I did a lot of the same stuff, like wanting to come up with these effects. And if you actually grab the examples that they have there and pull it in, see all kinds of like crazy cool stuff you might have not even thought of to do with text. It's just there. You just drop in a script.
Emojis was one for TextMesh Pro as a side note. I didn't know that it has emoji support. That's one of the, and not emojis like specifically just emojis. The general idea is you can embed glyphs and sprites. So the idea is if you're using TextMesh Pro, you can create a bunch of textures that are bound with a particular keywords that are effectively embedded sprites, and you can now, just like you do with the tags for color or size or whatever, you can now put a tag in to include images in the middle of the text. And it's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. It's a really nice feature to be able to have icons in the middle of the text from basically a repository of icons you pre-build. It's like, never occurred to me that it's just a feature it has.
Yep. Yeah, it was the same for me too. It was until I saw the example that I realized that was even an option. So yeah, that was the first one I wanted to share. The other thing that I wanted to just briefly mention was just about one of the most important things I think for getting shit done and like actually completing projects and building them or whatever it is that people want to do, and it's just being consistent. I forget, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. Actually, it was last night. I think I was ranting to one of my friends about like being successful on YouTube or anything else, and the biggest part just being consistent, like showing up, doing the thing daily, regularly, and being consistent with it. I think that it applies for things like YouTube was just one of the things I was happening to think about and talk about at the time, because telling me you should make a YouTube channel, because that's what I tell everybody.
That's why I have one now.
It's on the list, Jason. It's on the list.
Got to make a YouTube channel, right? But being consistent with it, like if you just make it, do it every day, upload something every day, it is going to be successful eventually. It's not going to be right away, but eventually, like if you're doing it and you're putting in the effort and the energy, you're going to get good at it, and it's going to get better, and it's going to be more successful. The same with a game, building games. If you just constantly build games every day and do it consistently, you're going to end up making good things eventually. If you just do it a little bit and then you stop, and then you do it a little bit and then stop and give up and only partially get anything done and kind of give up on everything, and don't be consistent with it, it makes it a lot harder. I don't know. I guess I just wanted to rant about being consistent and the importance of it. Oh, it's something that I try to struggle with, or kind of struggle with myself too. I'm trying to make sure that I like consistently upload things and get stuff done. So it's like a constant struggle, but I think it's really important for people to just remember, like more important than anything else, just actually constantly doing whatever the thing is you want to do and working towards it. I don't know. Yeah. Just rambly motivational nonsense. Who's got some useful tips now? Anybody?
Funnily enough, talking about the packages, the one thing I find that's inconsistent, so we're going to go and bypass it, is how people, when they build those packages or Unity packages, the way they provide the information to the person that's going to do it, like there might be a README file, or there might be a document, or there might be a link out to go somewhere else, or they've really put the effort in. And every time you open an editor, it has text there, it has details there. And the ones that I find are the better ones are the people that put the little bit of that extra effort in, and they go in and they customize all their editors. So when you're looking at the component, there's notes there. Or if you haven't added an extra component, or there's an example that you haven't looked at, they actually put the stuff in the notes on the component itself. Because a lot of people don't realize you can customize those editors and you can add loads of information in there. And it can really be a step-by-step guide on the component. Like you open it up and they've laid it out really nicely. And I'm trying to think of somebody who does it quite well, but it's evading me. But literally, you start it up, you add the component. Have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that?
Tween does that. Tween does that a lot, where you open it up and it instantly, it's like, come to install, and then you press it and it says, do you want to integrate with these packages if you have them installed? Check, yes, done. It's really nice. I'm a big fan of that. I like every inspector I ever give to a client will be customized, like every single time, because I very much believe, in fact, it's not just about ease of use for reading, it's also great for fixing things. So one of these things is, there's a lot of presumptions of understanding that you have as a designer. So the one I used before was a camera system. I kind of sat back, and the way I architected a camera system was, there's a set of cameras, let's say downstairs, upstairs, office 1, office 2, a set of cameras. Then there's a camera repository or a camera provider or whatever, and it uses a current set. And now you query the current set of cameras. And so whatever camera set has been active is the ones so if you're doing things like find this person or look at this thing, it'll only use the cameras from the camera set. And then finally, that camera set has a commander which uses that to make queries and do whatever. So there's like this inherent connection between 3 or 4 systems that I know about because I designed it, but other people don't. And so if you build systems that presume people know this needs a this and this needs a this, this needs a this, they're going to get in trouble if one thing isn't there. So what I do is I put a fix it button on everything. If there is a missed inspector field in the custom inspector, it says, if this field is null, write, this requires an X, and there'll be a big green button that says fix it. And what that big green button will do is it'll do a find object of type, which again, you should never use in a real build, but you can use it in editor to say, did they already make one of these? And can I drag it in for them without them having to think about it? And if they didn't, can I instantiate one, put it in the scene, drag it in, and then do all that for them? And so I have these inspectors where you could just throw in 5 scripts and go, fix, this needs a this, fix, go to, this needs a fix, go to, and go click, 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 and it'll hook itself up. You shouldn't have to, because there's a drop-down option to like create the prefabs. But if you don't know that, there's like the fix button. So I wholeheartedly agree that it should be batteries included is the term I use, where anything you drop in should just work. And then it can be customized, but the default experience should be press play and it works. You shouldn't need to know how to hook it up before it even starts, you know?
I mean, just look at Unity. When you add a normal map and it's not set to a normal map in the on the actual texture metadata itself, you add it to a material and it's like, did you know this isn't a normal map? Do you want to fix it? Fix it now. It does that. And on that point you were making, like, if you provide errors to the user from a game object and you're putting debug.log error and all that, a lot of people don't realize you can add a game object onto the end as one of the parameters. And when you press that error, it will select the game object in the actual hierarchy. So if you've got several things that are running and one of them goes bad and puts out this error, you can just press on the console and it will select the game object in the hierarchy. And people seem to miss that a lot.
Yeah, and in fact, talking about custom inspectors, here's an image to one that I made, which demonstrates not only can you do that, normally you can do that inside of your own scripts. So I always put buttons in my custom lists that will let you press a question mark that does a ping in the hierarchy, or go to it, which will literally select it for you and make it the current icon. So you should be able to jump back and forth seamlessly between different scripts. And as I was describing, this is what I was saying about the fix as well. So I have a link there to a little custom inspector. So this shows you, these are like, I put buttons like these on my inspectors that say, hey, where is it? Click it, it'll ping it in the inspector. Or if you click the button in the middle, it does the action. In this case, it calls cinemachine.activate. And if you click the go to, it will highlight that inspector and move the inspector to that one instead. And then the second link is the one I was talking about with the fix it button. I built a thing for custom inspectors that I can just say, anytime a field is required by a script, I can put this on it. And it's just one line of code for me in the editor. And you'll see that's why it's the exact same one. It says this requires an X, click to fix, and it'll then auto-populate it. Another one says this requires that, and so on. And so this is like a common language between you and your users as to how to use the system. And if they're ever confused, like you were describing, big about button, click about, here's a little text block that will explain what it does. So I'm a big fan of, and the thing is, right, people think this is just a nice thing or it's cool. It's for you too, because you will forget your own code in a few months' time. And if you can pull up an old system and go, what did this do again? And you can read your own description of it, life is so much easier.
And you don't get 12 artists turning around asking why something's broken or something like that, because they can literally see the thing right there because you've added this on. It saves you that much time in post-dev.
And there's tons of other little things too. Like another one I do is there's an actions panel. So you can't see it on that one, but in this other one I had, the idea was, as I said, you have a set of cameras, and then it's effectively every child under it is a camera. And then what you can do is you could, it shows them in the scene. But common actions would be, what if I want to rename all of these to downstairs or to the office or to the back room? You don't have to want to rename every camera game object. So if you rename the parent group and click rename all, it'll say backroom 1, backroom 2, backroom 3, backroom 3, and it'll name it as you presumably want to see it. And then on top of that, something that actually I saw in Jason Weimann stuff for the first time was you can actually label them inside the scene view. So I did this last one as an example where all of those cameras are actually visually represented by their labeled name in the scene if the object is selected. And so I can see now where all the security cameras are. And the current one selected where the cone is, and then you can click between them to select it. So again, this is all just like small quality of life stuff, and it may seem like over-engineering. But at the end of the day, I one time wrote a custom base inspector that says all future scripts can, and I have like these little helper methods. It takes me about 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes to make a new custom inspector per thing. That tab group at the top where it says cameras, actions, debug, and about, that's one line that says make tab group, 4 strings, comma, 4 actions, and it'll then populate that thing up. And that means every single thing has the same design language between me and the consumer. So it's just one of those things that, like, if you get into the habit of putting in that extra bit of work at the start, you could just forget about it. Your life will be a lot easier going forward.
Before we jump forward, there was a question about how you do the tabs, and you mentioned that it's just the attribute, but what do you actually use? Did you just explain really quickly what people would look at if they want to do tabs in the inspector?
Oh yeah, I can give you a script actually. I think I have one handy.
Okay. Share the script and make it simple. Are you just using buttons there, I assume, or something else?
No, there's an actual tab.
Using the tab
control. Yeah.
Hard to tell from that picture there.
Yeah, like there is someone else mentioned there's a tooltip one as well. That's fine, but I don't usually use that one because it's not a common design language in Unity, and there's a general rule that you want to stick with whatever the current system's design language is so that people know what they're doing.
And by the way, the debug log was apparently useful. Thanks, Jordan. And yeah, thanks, Dave. That's a good one. That's one that I use all the time too, and I never remember to tell people about it and like mention. Like, you want to find the object, especially if you got more than one of the thing. You want to know which one is broken and giving you the error.
It's funny enough, debug logging and even editors, Unity kind of glosses by a lot of the stuff you can customize in the editor and all the things you can make super cool. It's super easy. Even the attributes like require component that you add onto a monobehavior, and then when you add that thing, it puts the thing on there like, oh, this has to have a rigid body and a sphere collider on it. When I add this component, you put it on, they appear because they're required components of those things. So that's an attribute you can add, required component, and then type of, and then you just add the thing. You can add as many of those as well. I think like 7 of them. But,
personally, I hate that though, because it gets very confusing later when you try to remove something. It's like, this is required, so you can't remove it, and it starts to get very
it tells you what
frustrating.
What's required of it. But yeah, well, and the only thing is though, if it's definitely required by the thing, and you've got a designer that's removing it and then wondering why their thing didn't work because they removed the rigid body and suddenly the thing's flying through everything, and they're like, oh, why is that not happening? You lock it down. That's one way of doing it. But yeah, so Unity kind of glosses over a lot of the editor stuff you can do, and I know they're making a concerted effort now to try and put it out there. But you can really go super detailed on this and serializing objects and overriding the inspector.
The undo behavior is a great one too. You can use that for
undo's fantastic and recording object. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. Writing parts of the editor. So you can make, let's say I make something that creates a route in my scene. So it puts a load of transforms down across my scene. And I'm like, I didn't really want to do that. Now, in the editor, if you just make an option that says make 5 transforms, it just makes 5 transforms. If you go to Control Z that, you go to undo it, it doesn't undo it. And you're like, well, that's really annoying. You actually record that action happening. So you can record object, you can record a newly created object, or you can record something that's been changed on the object. And there's these record, undo functionality built into Unity. And it steps that into the undo queue. And then you can undo and you can redo it and you can move it back and forwards and stuff. So all of an editor function, if you're doing a destructive action and creative action, an altering action where you change something in the scene, you should enable that to be undo, because just for your own sanity as well. I mean, I've created plenty of things where I'm like, I want to reorder all this thing, and I reorder it, and I'm like, I've just messed up my scene. Being able to go back is an obvious one, but again, Unity don't really show that up.
And the thing is too, like, you don't really realize this either until you start diving deep into it. If you open the new Unity project and you started moving stuff around and like rotating it and doing stuff, and if you like don't press anything and then go to the top where the edit icon is and click the drop down, it won't just say undo, it'll say undo rotation, undo transforming, undo whatever. So it's aware of the context of what you're doing. And that's not like a passive feature. So what's actually happening there is someone who designs a custom inspector or tool can create an undo context. They effectively say, I am starting an undo action. Like, because you don't really think about it, but if you're doing like a custom tool where you press a button and it like makes a waypoint in the scene, maybe that's got like 5 steps to it. Maybe the steps are actually like spawn the object, set a certain icon, set a mesh, place it here, drop it down. You don't want the undos to go through like 5 steps of conceptual stuff that doesn't make any sense to them. They think the step is spawned waypoint or whatever, and that's what they want to be able to do or undo. And so what you do is you register a set of undo, do a bunch of actions, and then like that's named create waypoint. And so when they look at the undo option in the corner, it'll say, oh, undo create waypoint. So there's an entire tooling around kind of structuring what constitutes undos and redos in your custom inspectors. Now, to tell the truth, I don't mess with that too much. If you write your own custom inspectors, there's 2 ways to write inspectors. You can either write them out manually using the editor GUI layout .draw int field or draw int slider or whatever. And if you do that, you don't usually get all of the undo functionality. But if you use the draw field stuff, and use the recorder stuff, what it'll do is it'll actually do it automatically for you. So if you use the Unity's default serialized object kind of functions, so draw property field, for example, if you draw that one, it'll automatically register itself with the undo cycle for you. So in general, lean into using the serialized tools that Unity gives you rather than manually drawing out the inspectors. And if you do that, you'll kind of get a lot of this for free. But it is worth learning. Like if you have the time, look into this undo stuff and it'll make your kind of custom tools much easier to use.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Definitely something to add in if you're building out custom inspectors and custom editors, because you want to be able to undo. And I would bet that a lot of people just go in and manually recreate this functionality and put in their own special undo button, not knowing that they can just hook right into the system and use it. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see people do that.
In fact, actually, there's stuff that people, here's a fun tip. So I'm trying to think of like, again, I can give tips for days. There's tons of random stuff, but here's one that you might like. Most people don't realize this. Unity has a built-in animation system for their inspectors. And you don't see it very often because it's really unwieldy and it's not very good. But every so often, you'll have some custom inspector from some asset and you'll click it and it'll like slide open and slide closed. They didn't write that. That's actually part of Unity. There is an actual ability to create an animation prior to drawing your components, and it'll automatically do like if you do a fold-out object for a drop-down or something, it'll automatically animate it for you. I tried using it for some custom inspectors in the past, but it's just janky and not good, so I don't actually use it. But it's cool to know that like that's actually an inbuilt feature to animate your custom inspectors.
I had one question before I give Jason room to list off whatever random giant list of tips you got. On the UI stuff, on the custom inspectors, do you guys use any of the new UI stuff often with that? Do you use it exclusively or not at all? Or where are you guys at with using
I'm going to say no. I'm just going to quickly say no because I need to go to the bathroom. But no, I actually haven't. I've used it to see how it works, and I like it. But I'm not. It's not prime time yet, so I'm not using it yet. So I'll be back in a sec.
No problem, man. Perfect.
No, I haven't. I like it. I like the idea of it, writing style sheets and all the rest of it to put that stuff across. But no, I haven't had to do that yet.
Okay. I was just kind of curious. I find that it seems like about half the people I know are using it, but most people aren't doing a lot of custom inspector work. So there are very few people to ask about that. And it was like, and then when you're doing a custom inspector, it's usually so small that it's like, I don't want to switch to this new tech to do it that might change. So that's interesting.
I think Unity brought it out partly to try and get people to do more custom inspector stuff. But I got on okay with the things they were giving. And when I'm writing my own Windows for creating a node controller for AI or something like that, I've got so much old code that I could just pull out and change a bit of and have it up and running so quickly that I haven't bothered getting into it. But it's very much like do you remember the Windows Phone? They had the XSLT, I want to say. I'm probably way off base, but
yeah,
they had really nice layout. And it was that whole sort of the data abstraction layer, the presentation layer, the business logic layer, and all the rest of the stuff we learned from building databases on websites that sit in front of them and all the rest of the abstraction layers. That's really nicely done with Windows Phone and with the way they do all that sort of thing. Which is a shame Windows Phone doesn't really exist anymore. But that seems to be the way that Unity's going with a lot of their inspectors, which will make them look nicer, which will make them come across nicer and give them a better story as far as going forwards. But yeah, I've not had to get into that yet.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. So I was curious if either of you guys had jumped into just like using it consistently for everything that you're doing. But I've kind of found the same situation where like if I had an army of designers that were updating UIs and stuff and making changes and stuff, sure, I would definitely dive into it and make it like a big thing. But without that, and when UI stuff is generally a minor portion of what I do, it's just never been a priority, especially since
to be honest,
it's not fully baked.
The main reason I don't want to use it is actually not to do with how it works, because in a past life, I used to work in Windows stuff, and I used to use Windows 8 applications and Android applications. And so the idea of XAML-esque based layouts is nothing new to me. Like, I'm familiar with how the technology works. My problem is, well, WPF is probably the closest analog. It looks a lot like WPF. My main problem is it sometimes just breaks. Like, I don't know if you've done this, but if you try to add the new input system to a project, sometimes you just get a whole slew of errors saying, oh, UI stuff doesn't work because it expects certain ones and it's wrong the others. And it's like, I've tried to give people scripts and then the whole thing just explodes. And it's like, I can't reliably give people scripts if I can't guarantee that they're going to actually render or draw. And the native one just works. Like, I can write a single script called thing and thing editor, and I can send those two files to somebody, and providing it's in the right structured folder under editor, it will work. There is no questions, no complexity. So I probably would end up loving it if it got mainstream, to the point where I would make some ridiculous like custom inspectors with all sorts of cool animations because I enjoy doing that stuff. But I just can't bring myself to yet because it would be purely for my own entertainment and it wouldn't add any value to anybody I would give it to, you know?
That makes me feel better. I don't feel so bad about not diving into it yet. And feeling kind of the same way. All right, Jason, you want to jump into whatever tips you had ready? I'm sure you got something.
Well, again, I'll be honest, I didn't actually plan anything. I see this as a personal challenge. Every time we do this, I want to see if I can come up with random tips rather than actually planning them in advance. So
I plan them like 10 minutes in advance. That's my challenge. Like, all right, before the video, I write them down in Notepad. Like, all right, here they are.
I just try to think back to stuff that I found valuable or interesting. So one that really I thought was really cool the first time I saw it was, did you know that the attribute headers you're using, serialized field and header and range and all those, you don't need individual attribute headers for each of them. You can have one square bracket thing, comma, thing, comma, thing, comma, thing. So I would do square bracket, serialized field, comma, range, closed bracket. It just turns all of that into a nice one line. So anytime you got multiple bulk attributes, it just makes it a bit smaller.
I've never tried that. All right. I learned something new. Thank you. I'm going to super chat you real quick, Jason.
Cool, thanks. Don't forget to also like and subscribe.
Yeah, I'm going to hit the like button and subscribe. If that was new to you, make sure that you share the video too. All right, go ahead.
Another one that I thought was here's one that I never used, but it's kind of cool that it could do it, was did you know you can actually merge scenes? As in, like, literally copy all content from one scene to another. If you've got a diff or merge tool installed, and you literally drag a scene on top of another scene, Unity will pop up this really weird dialogue you've probably never seen and said, would you like to merge and create a new scene from these two? It's like, okay, and it'll just populate all the contents in the one scene. So I've never used that, but I once did it by accident and said, that's cool. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just popped up the UI now to see it. Weird. Okay. That sounds like a YouTube video.
Yeah. I did notice though. I did notice it needs some kind of git or merge tool, because if you try to do it by default, it won't work. So you will have to actually set up a proper diffing system so that it can merge two text files, which kind of makes it a lot less useful if you're not already using all of that tooling.
I just want to see what it's going to come up with now. Like, grab two random scenes and try to merge them and see what I get.
Well, if you don't have a diff tool, I bet it'll do nothing.
Well, I mean, with my diff tool.
Okay.
What does a merge of two different scenes look like? Is it actually going to merge them? It's going to be something weird. Should be fun. Very least, it'll be a clickbaity video. What else you got?
Okay.
So, just keep poking him.
Yeah.
More.
We've done the to-do list stuff before. We have done that one, haven't we? Like the actual to-do list.
The slash to-dos.
Yeah. We've talked about how you can make your own. One that just because it infuriates me because people don't do it very often is just using the inbuilt shortcuts in your editor, like stuff like CTOR, FOR each, all of those. A lot of people don't realize you can just, like, if you want to for loop, type FOR and press tab. That's it. You don't need to go through writing the whole thing out. That shouldn't be a tip, because if you've been coding for any length of time, that should have come up by now. But I'm surprised I still see people not using that.
You should hit that by accident now. I think the first time I did that was accidental. I typed it and I accidentally hit tab. I was like, what happened? And then you just realize that it puts the cursor right where you need to be. You don't have to move it. You don't have to do anything. You just start typing your variables, and it just automatically does all the magic for you if you let it.
I'm old school, so I still use the M underscore, which annoys everybody. And I was actually working for a company recently. Yeah, I know. I was working for a company recently, and somebody called me old. One of the coders is like,
"Oh, I was gonna say, eventually, if you're like, thanks, what are you in the 90s?
Yeah, 80s? Exactly. I'm like, oh. But anyway, the point was you can actually customize what comes up. So when you do like your float and you go to write something, or you do an animation curve and then you go to write it, and it pops up automatically. Do you want to call this variable animation curve? You can actually customize that and put the M underscore in there if you want to be old, like me. Yeah. Use M underscore or K underscore or something like that. But yeah, you can actually customize those as well, which is super fun. And you can do the same with functions and all the rest of it. Visual Studio, to do all those.
In fact, you can even go one step further. Like in my case, I write SING, and it will create a private static name of the class instance, and then a public static name of the class instant with a lazy loader, all in one, like SING tab. Done. Turns it into singleton. Yeah.
Nice. There was a question that popped up about the stream that I started, so I don't want to keep pushing you for tips. If you got more tips, go ahead, but I don't want to like...
Okay, well, I guess... Yeah, well, I think just then as a final on the tips idea, that's distracting. I'm trying to think, and I'm just watching you tapping at me. I did. I remember, like, I was just kind of thinking about it there, just when I went to get some more water, and it's like I've lost them now. You know what? I'll muse about it, and I'll come back with some in the middle of the conversation.
I'll do a tip, and then you can come back in. a lot of people, when they're doing lerps or something like that, from one color to another, will just keep it nice and straight all the way through. So they'll go from 0 to 1 in a nice straight line when they're doing a color. So from white to black or something like when they're fading out. But what a lot of people don't realize is that you can actually use animation curve as an actual property there. So you can write animation curve, whatever variable name you want to give it, and you can expose that in the editor, and then you can actually give it a nice exponential ramp, or you can make it go up and down or something like that. And then you can evaluate that curve when you're in your update loop or whatever. And you say, right, the time is this for my lerp, and I evaluate the curve, and this is the value I want to get back. So you can actually make really nice ramps on color changes, on anything. You can use animation curves for motion, for shaking, if you don't want to, test a Perlian noise or something like that. So yeah, there's a tip. Animation curves are awesome.
I can honestly say there's not a single value that changes over time I have ever done in Unity that didn't have a curve that could be lerped on, could control on it. In fact, actually, what's really cool about the curves is there's like, actually, because you said curve, there's like 50 things I can talk about just with curves, because I use those all of the time. So the first one is, yes, you can use animation. It's called animation curve, but that's a stupid name. It's not an animation.
It's just a curve.
So what you can do is, if you just write public animation curve, you can create one. But you can actually say there's a bunch of, so it uses what's called a builder pattern, which means there's a bunch of constructors of different types of curves pre-built. So you can say, if you want to instantiate the default curve to be a linear curve or a ease in out, you can also do that by saying curve equals new animation curve dot linear or dot whatever, and then you've got 4 parameters that are the 2 start points and 2 end points. So something I'll do all the time is animation curve equals new animation curve, 0, 0, 1, 1, and it'll give you like this is a default ease in out curve. But what's really cool is you can actually do the inverse of what you're saying. So you can use a curve to interpolate a value to make it smooth, but you can do the inverse, where if you were trying to log, and you can create a curve and then plot the points of a variable over time into that in the inspector to see the drawn curve of the points of the value that you're doing. So sometimes it's really fun if you're trying to figure out what's happening to the health bar. You can actually plot the health and you can watch it draw the curve for you of what the health bar did over the course of the experience. That's really fun because you get like a nice sort of, oh, that's what's happening. So that one's great.
They're very cool. And if you, and as you say, everything I do is using a curve, even if it becomes a linear after I've tested it one. I'm actually a linear is really nice, so I'm just going to keep it at that. But I just use curves instead because they give you so much more freedom to do that color change, to make that fade out, to make that expressive move or something like that. Yeah, I love it.
And the thing too is that people don't realize that curves, they're not a 0 to 1 value. They're usually used as 0 to 1 value, but they can go outside the ranges. And so if you combine it, so what usually you do is you take the value for the curve 0 to 1 and you feed it in as the parameter for time for lerping. So you would say take the curve over time and then take the curved value and then apply that into some mathf or lerp or vector3 lerp and then move the 2 objects over time against the curve. But what's really cool is if you use lerp unclamped, what lerp unclamped does is it doesn't limit you to 0 and 1. Literally, all that does is apply a clamp to it. So if you use mathf.lerp unclamped, and what happens is you can have the curve go above and below the 0 to 1 range and have it actually overshoot and come back. So there are certain cases where you want to give yourself the freedom. For example, something I did was this little, I actually showed it in a previous video. I had this camera fly up and like do a stop for a title sequence screen. I actually had 2 objects. I had the camera moving along a track, a dolly track, a Cinemachine dolly track, and then I had a target look object moving across another dolly track, and then I interpolated both together, and then I did a curve that controlled both of them, and then I could weigh that curve. And what's cool is that's position of the 2 objects on the curve. So if I use that as an ease in or an ease out, it would actually change the difference of the distance between the 2 objects because one would be curving slower than the other. So I could control where the camera was relative to where it was looking by changing the provided curves. So you can use those curves not just for like make a thing move smoothly, you can use it positionally to control time. So if you want something to like turn a corner slow or fast, you can basically control it with the curve as well. So there's a lot of like, curves is basically just a codified version of the concept of interpolation or easing or whatever you want to call it. But it basically, there's nothing in your code that won't benefit from having some sort of easing curve on it. And if you're looking for how to apply it correctly, one thing people don't realize is that you could apply curves arbitrarily, but there is kind of set design rules that dictate whether a curve is going to look good and have the effect you want it to. So the best example is There's tons of cool curves. Like you've got ones that do bounce in or elastic in out, and they kind of do that like boing thing or that sort of like drop. Dun, 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 dun. If you forget all of those, and if you just use ease in out, sine wave ease, or whatever you want to call it, but it's effectively just a sine wave. Just that alone, there's so much you can do with that. So the way that works is it effectively applies velocity. So if you use a sine wave curve, it'll either ramp up, like as if you're sort of driving a car and building momentum, or it slows down to position. Just those two. And it's ease in and ease out. And funnily enough, you use them the other way around. If you're trying to bring something into the scene, you use an ease out. Because what you're saying is apply the easing on the end. In other words, it should slow in, so ease out. And then if something is leaving the screen, you should use an ease in, because the ease starts in and then speeds out of the frame. And so in both of those cases, that's how you get smooth animations, is when you're moving stuff into the screen, you use the out. If you move something out of the screen, you use the in. And if something is on the screen and changes position, you use ease in out. So it smooths up and then slows down. So if you're ever confused with easing, just use the standard curves, just use ease in out. And then if you just follow those rules, everything will suddenly look smoother. They're like basic design, because this doesn't come from gaming. This comes from UX design principles. As for durations, you might be confused going, how long should something be fading back and forth? Companies like Apple have done countless studies. You can literally read hundreds of pages of papers on what millisecond count should certain swipes and things animate to. And the shorthand is 0.5 and 0.3. That's where you want to live. 0.5 is max, 0.3 is pretty good. Lower than that can be a bit too small. Anything higher than that feels sluggish and doesn't feel responsive. So if you're just looking to make all of your stuff, everything, every button, every panel that swipes in, everything being placed, everything moving better, eases of 0.3 to 0.5 and in and out appropriately relative to whether it's coming in and out of the screen. If you just do those two, everything will suddenly look 10 times more polished. And if you're looking for examples of this, literally take the Microsoft dashboard, the new PS5 dashboard, the pause screen menu that's been added to the Mario All-Stars, the new version of it. Every single one of them, you'll see it does the same thing. It does the exact same. If you've got two tabs or two panels, when it's moving from one screen to the next, the old one turns off immediately. That's the first rule. Old content should disappear immediately. New content should come in with animation. Because what it does is the animation draws your eye to the new stuff and the old stuff goes out quickly. So if you've got two pieces of content switching places, old thing out immediately, new thing slides in. So that's what curves to use and when to use them. And then finally, the last thing you want to do is use draw their eye to the target destination. So if you've got something on screen, a big mistake people do is they'll animate something out or in at the same time, or they'll move two things at once. And a good rule of thumb is like, imagine a beam, like a laser coming out of your eyes onto the screen, and draw that point in your head. And whenever you're designing animations and cool stuff happening on screen, draw the path your eye takes from that dot of where stuff is animating. And it should never jump too far. Every animation should move you along from place to place. So what I mean by that is if I've got something here and I'm changing it to something else and I want to move this out, if I slide this down and I slide something else in, my eyes would have gone like this just to track what was going on. Instead, if I move this down and I move the next thing up, my eye goes, oh, I can see it. My eyes were following the path of that. And so in general, keep that mentality of having an eye dot as you move stuff, and it'll make all of your stuff feel more professional. And the final one, very easy for like if you specifically want a full screen change of content to another change of content, this one's really cool. It's really slick and you'll see it in, again, everything. If you've got one thing on screen and you want to put new content up, turn off the old one, set the new one to appear, but like here, not fully there, about 70% of the way, and then just coast it into position. And if you do that, what happens is your eyes see the old thing disappear, the new thing come in, and then it moves precisely to the top of the eye line. So if there's a paragraph of text, the text will literally draw your eye to the first word of the next paragraph. And you don't realize it's doing this, but you'll see this like literally, if play any console, the hub screen, and just watch the content. Ask yourself if it's coming in low and then slides up. Guarantee every single one of them will do that. That's like universal design language for tabs and pages and whatever. So that is just curves. So that is a topic I could go on even more with, but I think we'll stop there because that's like the basics of design.
That was great.
They commented it was like a full UX course worth of information in that little package. That's like a whole video right there.
That's his own video. Just chop that out. Put that as his own one. Yeah.
Chop it out. So specifically on curves and animation.
if we're being pedantic, that's particularly about UX motion. So UX motion is a topic in and of itself. There's UX and UX design, and there's experience design, and there's like, if you want to go down this rabbit hole, each one has rules and principles. We haven't talked about like color theory and space and how you should use leading lines, all the other stuff, and even how that applies to level design and all that other. But like specifically just for UX motion, curves, and those rules I mentioned.
Yeah, and if that was helpful, make sure that you hit like, subscribed, and you watch the full episode after I cut this piece out and make it into a separate video. Go back, watch the full thing, hear us blab about a whole bunch of other tips and stuff too. That was good stuff. Very, very useful. Like I said, I always get really good tips out of this. Like every single week, people come back with cool stuff, and I like the animation easing and curving stuff, and it just kind of like inspired me and gave me a bunch of ideas now on things that I want to do.
I will say the reason I really delved into it is because a lot of people understand easing is good and they kind of get the instinct of why, but they don't know which one do I use. Is it good to use this or whatever? So like I think that's one of those overlooked things to kind of learn the fundamentals of when and why, you know?
Yeah, totally. So there was
I love that. Yeah.
There's some funny comments in here about underscores and all kinds of other stuff, and I'm just losing my train of thought because there's too much stuff cracking me up.
So I will say, okay, that underscore one, actually, that's a fun little rant in and of itself. So a lot of people just think that's like an arbitrary choice, but those things come from a reason, right? A lot of these design choices, they had an original point of why they existed, right? So the original point was that previously, if you wrote code, it was the whole like spinning it up on literal sheets of paper, punched out the holes, you'd send that off to be compiled, and someone would compile it out, put it in, type it into the machine and do whatever, press play, and then have it run through and build. And so the idea of using a notation where you prefix your variables with their types made perfect sense, because if you messed up and tried to apply a string to an int or an int to a string, you would be like wasting an hour of everyone's time, because you would have to go
like
through
a day
whole
of turnaround getting the thing back, right? Like you submit it and you get it back the next day. Like, oh, there was an error in your code. Gosh,
yeah. So it's perfectly reasonable as to why it exists. Now, my counter is it's not reasonable anymore, because there's no point to do that, because we have all of the power of editors and compilers. So separately from that, then the next one is why the underscore. Well, a lot of people think, again, it's stylistic underscore, it's, separate stuff, but it's not arbitrary either. The reason you use the underscore is it indicates class scope. It doesn't mean it's an argument. It doesn't mean it's a parameter. It doesn't mean it's public. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. What it means is throughout the course of your code, there'll be a bunch of stuff with the same name. So take a player. A player has health. There's going to be public-facing health that you can read. There's going to be public-facing health that you can set. There's going to be health privately as arguments passed in, as in the new desired health. There's going to be health passed in as comparisons against other health. So the word health could be like 50 times in your class, like a whole bunch of words health. And which one of these is the reference in memory? Which one is the actual health that this class has? Wouldn't it be nice if there was like a small symbol right in front of it to tell you this one over all of the others is actually the one that is the health that all the others reference? So you use an underscore. And that way, when you are internally messing with a file, the underscore should be the variable you change. And then when it's exposed outwards, there should be no underscore visible. So a lot of people make the mistake of having public underscored variables. You should never be exposing them outside of the class. The point of that underscore is to tell you, when I am in this class and I am making function calls to change the values, this is the one that I should access. For example, if you're doing your own method calls where you're like, if health is greater than this and health has this and whatever, you shouldn't be using the getters, the public getter for that, because that's unnecessary method calls and wasted time and processing cycles. So whenever you're doing internal logic, it should be with the underscored variable. When you're exposing it out, it should be without it. So in general, the rule should be that you should never see those underscores outside of it. And all stuff facing outward should be public, color, or whatever else. And same goes with the getters and setters. The reason they exist is because in Java, for example, which C# was effectively stolen from, the standard was private underscored variables and then public get underscore thing for name. So private int health, public get underscore health would return health, set underscore health brackets health equals this.health, and it would set the health. So that was the standard every time. Copy and paste, the same thing. Name, health, doesn't matter what you're talking about. It's these three things. The variable, the getter, the setter. Variable, getter, setter. Or as it's correctly called, the variable, the accessor, and the mutator. That's the name for the two variants. Now, C# looked at that and went, that's a lot of boilerplate code I have to write every damn time. And so they have properties. And all the properties are a wrapper of that concept that doesn't require you to write 50 lines of code. So you just write public int age get set. And it will, when the code compiles, if you read the code, it will be a full getter and a full setter. It'll just write it for you after the fact. So that's why there's a difference between underscores, publics, the getters. Like, all of these things are not stylistic design choices. They are actually there to solve and explain purposes. And so some of those arguments get really annoying when I see people go, well, this one's nicer and I prefer this one. It's like, no, like, you're wrong. You're objectively wrong. There's a reason they exist. Yeah.
Go back and do C programming for a while and then start looking at all that stuff. And all the K's and the S's and bringing all that, because it's static, it's constant, it's a boolean, it's super fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, supposedly that makes me old, according to some people.
Well, the M does. The M definitely makes you old.
That makes you fine.
I mean, I just said, the M is literally you saying, I am making sure this is a member variable. It is known to anybody doing the paper compiling of my code. So you are actively saying, this is now capable of being compiled by paper. That's how old you are.
And then you got the K instead of the M. Yeah, it's all fun.
The interesting thing was seeing how many people, when I was first learning code and first working in projects, how many people were using it without really knowing why we were using it, just because that was the standard in the project and that was what you did. Like,
it was lost. It got lost in translation, and then it just became a style thing, and people missed out that it was there. And then the styles changed, and people were bringing their own styles in and changing those things. And as Jason just pointed out, there was a reason that they were like that.
And I've tried ditching it. Like, I tried getting rid of that underscore a couple times. I even did a video about it. And the problem that I ran into, and the problem that a lot of people would probably run into, was that, like, without the underscore, I could easily tell the variables. I could color my private variables, see them, and it was very easy to tell, like, hey, this one's different. It's a different color. Easy enough, right? Simple. I could tell what it was. But I couldn't control what editor everybody else was using. And I couldn't get everybody else to have that same functionality. And they would still end up with occasionally, on accident, writing to the wrong variable. Very rare, but when it does happen, it's just annoying. And I feel like it just gives me a tiny bit of extra speed when I'm reading the thing to not have to think through, like, which health is it, right? Exactly. Like, is this that private health? Is this the other one? Which is why I like using them even more than, like, a lot of the time, one of the things that Jason briefly talked about but didn't go deep into was the private setters too. You can have a property that's got a public setter or public getter and like a private or protected setter, so you get most of that functionality without having to write the underscore field. But even then, sometimes I'll be setting the thing and I'm like, wait, am I setting the right variable here? And I gotta go look and see if it's actually like a property with a private setter, especially if the class has gotten more than, like 40-50 lines long and I can't just see it all on the screen.
And in fact, you can do the opposite side of that too, and that really freaks people out. They have no idea what's going on. So think about it. You can expose the ability for a variable to be get or set, or both, or neither, right? That's options you have available to you. And the most common one is you can read it, but you can't change it. That's like the most common. It is public to get, not to set. You can invert that. You can have something that is capable to be set, but not capable to be read. And that might seem really weird. Why would you ever want that? Well, if you think about it, think about the concept of a script that can log things. If I have a player and a player can log his position, I should never be able to like get the logger on a player because like I shouldn't know what the player is logging. I should be able to set it if I want events from that player, but I should never be like anytime you ever get the logger from the player to use it, already something's wrong in your architecture. Why are you like taking a logger off of a player to give to something? Like that's not something that should ever make any sense. So in the same vein, a lot of UI stuff follows that pattern. If you use like the Humble Dialog or other things in that category, oftentimes you'll have a UI which has required variables to render. So for example, say I was drawing a UI that showed a person. The whole point of it's like a little avatar and their name, a little like thing for the current player. I should never be able to query that object because the data is the thing I would query. But once I set a player to it, I should never be reading that. It should be like, draw this. This is a thing for you to draw. And so it makes a lot of sense, even though it doesn't seem like it, to have a settable like user data, but not a gettable one, because you should be thinking in that relationship as one directional. So that one kind of confuses people at first. You're like, wait, I can set its value, but I can't actually get its value. It's like, yes, that's actually, there is cases where that's a valuable thing to do.
It's a weird, I'm trying to think of any situation where I've ever actually done that and struggling. I can imagine some like theoretically, but yeah, I'm trying to remember of one where I've done it. Interesting.
I do it all of the time for my presentation layers, because if you expose your presentation layers to have public getters, what you're saying is you can use the view as a way of providing data. And that's dangerous. Like, you shouldn't ever allow people to like presume the data coming out of a display is accurate. The data going into a display is accurate, but the display could like mess with it and like add like turn a name, first name, last name into Sir, Mr, first name, or whatever they want to do to mess with it to display it. You shouldn't reliably assume that the display information is accurate, because it's only there to be displayed. So in all presentation layers, I will always have it be set only.
Interesting. I'll have to check that out sometime. See like some code. I'm curious to see what it looks like. There's also a note about the new init flag that's going there.
I was going to say that's got to be new, because I've never seen that before, and I know most.
C#9.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. New one. And I doubt it's going to work very well with Unity because we don't have access to the constructor. But yeah, it'd be interesting. I think with the init one, though, you can do equals and do an assignment, right? Like an initial assignment in there? Or is it only in the constructor?
You can do that with with the constructors you can going forward. You can already do that with the properties. You can already set like a default property value.
But can you make with it read only?
Yes, you could say public int health equals 10, and you have a read only 10 health. Yeah, but again, that's all.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, but obviously, like, but if you don't have a private setter, there's no point in doing that. You should just use a constant. But if you are going to have a private setter, then that makes sense.
Cool. Well, I think we're almost at the end of time here, so I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to jump into or talk about before we wrap things up. Maybe just send everybody over to Dave's website, to Warped Imagination, and crash it real quick and go subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Brand new YouTube channel. There's no, like, literally I made it like a week ago or something, because you kept hounding me and other people kept hounding me to build one. You're like, you should have a YouTube channel. You should have a YouTube channel, like, for the last 3 years. So yeah, now I have one, Jason. I've done it.
Good. Yes, everybody should have one. Everybody watching, if you've been thinking about it, just do it. There are actually a couple people who have YouTube channels that I'm gonna have on sometime soon too. Just talk about that stuff in game dev and YouTube channels, because it's fun. It's good stuff. You should do it. Everybody should do it.
But I won't be teaching anything. Like, if anybody wants to learn stuff, stick with Jason Weimann. My stuff is merely, I built this cool thing. Have a look at it. If you like it, it might cause some inspiration, and that's it. Because I'm not a teacher.
Yeah, I would love to do those sometime, but I always struggle with them. I've got one that I'm gonna do sometime soon. I want to do one on some tech stuff, some modding things, and maybe one on chairs, because apparently I have a chair obsession. I got a ridiculous number of chairs in the house. Gaming chairs.
Maybe we should trade. You give me some chairs, I'll give you some headphones, and we'll sort of even things out of it. You know?
Yeah, is that going to be the next thing? Everybody has to show what chair they're doing.
My wife keeps giving me crap for getting this one. This one has a massager built in.
Dude, no.
It massages up and down. I was like, oh, that's cool.
I can't say much either,
but I like the Razer one more.
Mine's not exactly a cheap chair either. I'm using the Herman Miller Embody. I don't know if you can see that. That's one of the big fancy.
The cost of both of these combined.
Exactly. Yeah, this chair costs nearly as much as my computer, and my computer is not a cheap computer.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go, Jason.
The one I really want to try out is that Logitech one, but they're gonna have to send me a free one or something.
The gaming version of is that the gaming version of the Herman Miller Embody, where they've literally just put a tag on it and said, "Oh yeah, it now has a tag." I'm surprised they didn't go and chuck RGB for it.
It was tall and had like the spine adjustment stuff on it. The Logitech one, you didn't see that?
Is it the Logitech version of the Embody?
It might be.
I thought it was just the Embody that they like put like a gamer tag on it or something.
No, it was.
I haven't heard of that.
Oh, dude, I'll have to have a look at that.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I was expecting Logitech to go put RGB through the whole entire thing or something.
Yeah, I mean, they need to make a version 2 with RGBs.
Did you see the Razer RGB headphones? That one. White RGB headphones. Come on, like why?
Razer's RGB face mask. Did you see that?
I have seen it. I still don't get why anybody would want lights on their face. Like,
you know what
I
makes it
love
worse?
Razer stuff. Wait, I'm not for once. I'm not wearing.
I love Razer stuff, but yeah,
I love their stuff, but I certainly don't want a big. I even have Razer masks. I have like the The Razer cloth masks. I got them right away when they came out, and that was the only thing available. It's like, bought them up. But
the only Razer things I have is
electric one. No.
I use the gaming keypad. I still use the various, like the one-handed
the Orb Weaver.
I have an Orb Weaver Chroma, and I have the other one too. So I use that a lot because, well, I use Topher keyboards for my normal typing, which aren't as great for gaming, but I like the mechanical keys for gaming, so I use that one. But I don't use any other Razer products anymore. And I gotta say, the mask, the worst thing about that is it was a joke product. They came out with this like glowing face mask thing as a joke, and then enough people wanted it, they turned it into a real product. That's what makes it worse.
They seem to do that with a lot of things. I still want a toaster. I'm waiting for a toaster.
It's an embody with a logo on it.
That is legitimately an embody. Ugh, that's disgusting.
I don't think it's any taller either. I think it's the same.
No, it's got the.
I thought it was taller. I thought it was full height, but that's one of the reasons like I would never grab it because you can't try the damn thing out. Like, and they're ridiculously expensive.
It's got the exact same size setting thing. Although I will say, here's my hot take. Even though I've spent a fortune on this stupid chair, it's good. But I still prefer the Herman Miller, the previous one, the
Aeron.
The Aeron. I think the Aeron's a better chair.
No, I'm the other way around. I had an Aeron when I had a studio up in Culver City. I had an Aeron for all the team there. We all had Aerons.
Well, everyone. If you have a Silicon Valley style business, everybody
everybody had Aerons. Like if you want a cheap chair, go and find a studio that's gone out of commission up in Silicon Valley or up in
100%, yeah. That's always the strategy, yeah. You just buy out their old chairs.
Selling tons of them. But I used the Aeron and I preferred the embody. I don't know, maybe it's my back or I'm getting old.
I will say one thing though. Here's one thing that people don't realize. There's actually 3 versions of that chair, right? Where there's sizes A, B, and C. And depending on you as a person, yeah. So you have to make sure you get the right one because I noticed I originally tried an Aeron A and it was like, this is uncomfortable for me because it's got that curved seat. You basically, unironically, have to find one that fits the size of your ass. So an Aeron B was perfect for me, but an A was just a bit too dainty. So B was the perfect chair for me, but they're harder to find.
There was one last question I just wanted to mention. Somebody was asking about the Knights game. I'm going to actually just wrap that up as a full video and edit it. I was doing it as a live stream. Had a little mini emergency pop up and didn't get to finish the video. So I'm just going to record it all as a video, edit it up, and kind of trim it down for everybody to run through the process because that was a really fun one and I need to, and I want to finish it up. So that's a quick answer to that one. Anyway, I guess I'll wrap it up here. So thanks again, guys, for coming up. Unless, again, any last second things you want to ask to talk about? Chairs are a good one, but I don't know if you guys got anything else. Otherwise, we'll just end it and be back.
I don't have anything for this one. I will say though, a topic I would like to pencil in at some stage is audio and Unity. It's a big interest of mine. I have I've been recently messing around with Fmod and I found out here, just a small side note. It's like a teaser for next week. I figured out how to take events from Fmod and actually register them Unity in the other way around. So normally you fire events from Unity into Fmod for dynamic music, but you can actually do the opposite. You can register. You have to do messy code that you have to manage your own garbage collection. You have to hook into their system and actually manage pointer references. But if you do that, you can have a alloc-free reference to the array of the marker events that are there generating, which means you can do rhythm game type stuff where you can have stuff in your game happen relative to events fired from Fmod, which is really cool. You can have songs or whatever that fire music events that control stuff. And even if the designer changes the songs and just moves the events around, all the code in Unity still works the same way. So there's a ton of really cool Fmod stuff you can do that just fundamentally makes it better than Unity audio. And that's a really fun topic to talk about at some stage.
Yeah, that sounds cool. It'd be fun to do. I've always wanted to make an audio game, especially the VR ones after playing all the
Beat Saber,
and Audio Shield and all that stuff. Oh man, why didn't I make one of these? They seem like a lot of fun to do. So that'd definitely be an interesting one to talk about. Cool. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe, share the video. Leave a comment after as soon as it ends. Just go down and leave a comment. This was the best show ever. Thanks, Dave and Jason. Right? Something like that. And yeah, don't forget to go subscribe to their stuff and drop by. Jason's got a link so you can send him some coffee. straight over to Ireland, right? Irish coffee.
Yeah, if it taught you anything, if you enjoyed any of it, feel free to buy me a coffee. That would be nice. I drink a lot of coffee, so.
All right, thanks again, everybody. Thanks again, everybody, for watching, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye.
Thanks a lot.